Boop. Okay, that's working. Okay, let me unmute myself. Oh wait, nope. Oh no. What have I done? Okay, wait, am I okay, hello! Alrighty. Hi, Green Coder. Hi! Okay, so we might watch something to start. Let me see if I can find this. I saw randomly on YouTube a therapist, I think he's like a PhD level psychologist, I want to say. And they were talking about misemployment in autism. And they're like, yeah, that's a good term. Let me see if I can find that. Because he just mentioned it briefly. And I was like, yes, that is a good term. Okay, I'm going to see if I can find this guy. So it doesn't pop up immediately. But the employment thing, I gotta go back to again. And it's not great. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna look through my history and then I will at least play the one thing that I saw. I think it was in shorts. Me. Wait a second. Am I in the right thing? Hello. One sec while I try to find something. Was I in my other account? Maybe I was. Hold up. Oh, I guess so. Huh. I have like my email account and then I have my account for my whole channel. Okay, so let me try to find this. This guy mentions this term and I'll see if I can get anything more, but he's a new person that I found. Okay, this was interesting. So Neurodivergent Doctor is his channel. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, not that one, this one. Go live. Okay. And I should be able to just click on that one and get it. Okay. Is this playing for the wrong thing? Yes, it is. Okay, one sec. I have to fix that too. Okay, so that thing, literally that thing. I don't know if he talks about it more on his channel, but misemployment, because the thing, so he's a clinician that works with autistic people. And he's neurodivergent. I don't know in what sense. I think he also does have autism. I think he's like autism and somewhere in the ADHD autism thing. But yeah, I'm going to have to look into this person because I found that to be great. And I think it highlights the problem of us having an actual disability instead of this idea that because it's not visibly apparent in the way that people think of disability, even though it actually is visibly apparent, but neither here nor there, it's like we're being asked to work in things where we literally are going to get hurt because of the level of disability that we actually experience and how profound it is. So it'd be like the analogy that I use is it's the congenitally blind because of there's actually a parallel that's literal. But you wouldn't put somebody who's congenitally blind in a factory and be like, you'll be fine. It's incredibly frustrating. So I'm just so frustrated with like what we're having to do right now, which is become popular in order to get enough money because we can't earn enough. And I literally am just like, I mean, we could keep going on and on, but we need for the time being to get away from anything that love bombs us with like a fantastical vision of the future where everything will be fine, because it's not gonna fucking happen. And even in so far as like we get anywhere near like a wonderful future where we don't have these issues, uh the people that are promising it are just basic snake oil salesmen and people who want attention, and like just people with other disorders and other social behaviors that are abusive. So we need autistic people to not get caught up in like meaningless platitudes or groups that are advocating for um, like radical restructuring of all of society when there's a revolution or something like that. No, just no, we're not doing that. And just expecting that like some of this is going to suck, but until we figure out how we can and we'll get Lauren in on this, like she was talking about boundaries, like how we can enforce what our actual boundaries are based on our disability, we're going to get really hurt and we're not going to get the most that we can out of this current situation, which we have to do. We have to have more money. That's like the end of the day. Each individual autistic person, we have to find a way to do that. And I think long term, that's also going to give us, the power to push for legislative change, because I will say that that does have to happen. Okay, that's my spiel. Mhm. 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 Yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I think the current zeitgeist and environment, there's reasons why, and I can understand it, to like have this wide net so people don't get lost. But I think at some point we're going to have to say like, hey, we either really open this up and we have a conversation about disability, period, with everyone included that's disabled, so that we can get this shit sorted out, which I also think we should be doing, or we start to get a little bit more specific about our neurodevelopmental disability and that it is like an anatomical thing in the brain, so that we don't include in our midst people who have something else entirely going on that is going to further mess up our boundaries, or will sidetrack us, like knock us out of our ability to function. Yeah. Anywho, and on that note, I'm going to start a load of laundry. Awesome. Yes, thank you. If you'd like to talk a bit, please, uh, yes. Yes, we can hear you. Oh no. Okay, hold on a second. Let me fix it. That's weird. I think my headset wasn't totally on. Okay, now we're good. Okay. Okay. So do you
Okay.
wanna
All right.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
I fix it.
I'll paraphrase. Um, yes, but now can you hear me?
Yes.
Um, so I want to start a like a weekly peer support group for autistic people who have a marginalized identity, who are also like have some kind of marginalized identity in some way. Um, that focuses like primarily on boundaries, how we can assert them, how when are the, like identifying safe times to assert them, when it's not safe, how can we assert, like what can we do then, like, and also just getting us connected to each other
Mhm.
and unlearning some of that kind of like internalized ableism that makes it hard to assert boundaries. Because that's what I found with myself is that as long um as like I had um a sense that I didn't deserve the boundaries I had, right?
Mhm.
um, then it wasn't going to work anyway, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so so as far as like okay, so marginalized identity, my thought is like no, not necessarily. Um, so my experience
It's different.
is, you know, is it's different. So the idea of who is excluded. So I just don't have the experience of like a cisgendered great white male who's autistic. I just don't. Like that is a very different experience, and it's different enough that I don't feel comfortable, like, and I don't feel knowledgeable enough to talk about it. Does that make, like, if that makes any sense? So, like, if, well, so women, LGBTQ, um, you know, BIPOC, like all of those things, like, it's a different thing to have to think about being autistic and this. That's a different thing than just being, oh, my idea, I'm autistic. Like, you kind of only have to worry about the fact that you're autistic.
Yeah,
You have to worry about the autistic and whatever, and this other thing.
it's a unique problem, and I think maybe that's the best way
Yeah.
to phrase it. Says that like so unfortunately the way that this has gone down because they literally just look for white men and white boys,
Hmm.
that means that you're considered more employable in this weird fundamental way that you have to unpack because the society isn't going to change. And we have to unpack a different problem because the society isn't going to change. So there's like an undesirable for employment and inclusion in society. And those people have been determined to be women and everybody who's the white thing gets really weird because there's like a whole white supremacist thing and it's very much like based in kind of like America and Europe. So that wouldn't even necessarily extend everywhere. It's kind of like well, it's really like the UK. Anywho, but so that you know your mileage may vary, but for an English speaker in general who's been interacting with like the DSM-5 or the ICD, uh, you are in the criteria that got caught and we were not. And so we have radically different situations going on now and also like not that we wouldn't unite and change that but we need times to work on our employment problems and our boundary problems because they're really different. So like a white man on the spectrum may have more issues with never being with anybody. A white woman on the spectrum, a black man on the spectrum, a black woman on the spectrum. Like we get into this territory where these are people that are more likely to have been abused by people like and exploited in relationships or even worse than that where we're talking about something that is technically assault or uh yeah, so you're less likely to have that problem, not that you can't obviously, and then we have time to talk about it. um but there needs to be a space
Like,
where the
yeah.
people who weren't troubleshot at all can acknowledge the fact that we have a really different problem. Not that we should, but that's what society is handing us, similar to the fact
But
that
we
we don't
do.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't have employment. We also have this problem hand. You get it? So it's not personal, it's just reality. It's just reality.
And I think too, if I feel like I've been successful in that kind of realm, right? Like if in that way, then I think there is an option or a place down the road for a just, autistic, and that's the criteria kind of group. But right now, I don't feel like I'm in the right spot to take that on. Like I need to be more myopic because that way I'm going to be better at it. You know what I'm like?
Hmm.
I don't want to screw people over. Like, not that but you know what I mean? I don't want to like,
They put us in
this
completely
isn't
different
saying like I
scenarios.
know.
Yeah, they put us we're in
Yeah,
completely
like
different
it's not
scenarios.
like I
That's
just
just,
don't
yeah,
know it.
yeah, yeah,
I
and
just
that's,
don't know what it
yeah.
is to be like a boy and like white and everything that's okay on the top. And so and what I found too, right, working with autistic kids, here's what I found is that autistic boys, the autistic traits are just fine. Like they're not, I want to say beaten out of them, but not like metaphorically, right? Metaphorically beaten out of, you know, women and people of color and anybody who's outside of that. Like the comfort of white men is so important.
Hmm.
And white boys are just kind of parented and socialized to for their comfort to be very important, right? And so their traits, they're not as
What's the masking?
encouraged to, right, like they're just not, right? Like I got from as soon as I was like too outspoken or too loud or too whatever, like too autistic, too movie, too energetic, too antisocial, too quiet, like I got that I got that corrected immediately
Hmm.
by not just my family but my teachers.
Yes, which is why we
Like
become shy. It's so it's not that we're not, Jamie, you got to be careful too. Okay? So we're not being prejudiced. The society is prejudiced. If you erase what happened to us and fold it into what happened to you and say it's identical, we have a big problem because no one's ever going to talk about us. We don't matter. We don't matter in the same way that men
we don't
do.
exist then.
We don't exist. We don't
We just
exist.
don't.
We'll just be whatever men say we are when they have the microphone and we are marginalized or bullied or ostracized or
We're
told
in the
that we're not good enough.
background.
It's ridiculous. And we have to break through this, and it just has this conversation has to be plain spoken because I didn't decide for that to happen to me. Lauren didn't decide that. You didn't decide that. But the society, that's what we actually
None of
have
us
dealt with.
decided
Yeah.
who to get where on the side of the fence we were going to fall. Nobody did that. Nobody loves the fact that this is the case. I hope, right? I'm
Right,
sure some
right,
people do, but like
right.
none of us are happy that this is the case. But we have a different fight. It's different.
Hmm.
It's not better or worse. It's not that, like you don't have any problems and we have all the problems. That is not the case at
And
all.
yeah, and men, and this is just something we gotta say this. Boys and men are allowed to interrupt women at any time they want to say, but what
Yep.
about my experiences? I don't
What
relate
about
to
me?
that. Please talk about what happened to me. And it's so deeply ingrained. Like this is something that was reinforced when people were toddlers, right? So this is so early on. And then for me to say no, we can't do that because we've never gotten to talk about this and we have to. And when we talk about it, we're going to get bullied by people outside of the autistic community. So the autistic
Hmm.
community, it's not like you need to sit down and blah blah blah. It's just that not every space is for everybody all the time. That's it. And that's like, so she's talking about specifically is to have a space where we actually can talk about this stuff. And the feminism has to do this sometimes too, where like you can have like a feminist space, and some, if men want to hang out and just be there to listen, they can, but they just can't say shit because it's the socialization, right? Yeah. So
And
yeah.
we really need we need your support in this situation.
your
is the thing.
struggle is real, but it's different. You will never have what happened to me happen to you.
Different.
You were not
We'll never
sexually,
understand.
like trigger warning, but you were never sexually assaulted at a party because you didn't know what was going on, right? At a thing that you didn't even understand any of that. You didn't have that happen. You would never be put in that situation because you were in a completely different dynamic. And like the things that
Yeah.
happen to girls and women are just quantifiably different. They're meant to be quantifiably different. And if we say that females and males in a male, and it's not even it's a male supremacist society. If we don't say that, then you know who's going to make up the next story? A bunch of males, because we'll never have female leadership come up and say anything too. So like so you see what I'm saying? So and it'll make this thing tricky. But what we're saying is like this has to happen if you want autism to get figured out. This has to happen, and we'll work out all the ugly stuff in the interim, even though it's difficult to talk about. We just can't care. We just can't care. We just have to do it anyway.
And
Mm.
just
Yeah.
to add in the context is that like some male autistics will get sexually assaulted as
Yes.
well,
Yes.
but it is on it is through the dynamic and lens of this male supremacist system,
Mhm.
and it does not happen in the ways and rates at which it happens to female autistic people, right? It is
Yeah.
not simply sort of a part of the experience that you're going to talk about with all autistic men, while it makes sense to bring up with all autistic women.
Right.
Just
Yes.
isn't
That.
there,
Thank you.
right?
That I really appreciate that. Yeah, it makes sense to bring it up with autistic women because we may have internalized a lot of shame as well. And we learn not to center ourselves. We learn that when we do center ourselves, it's inappropriate. So I would say like don't use the language of like prejudice. That's not our shit, man. We don't get to be prejudiced. We don't get to do that shit. Even when people run around like trying to make it, oh, that category of women are bad now, you just know it's punching down. It's just an excuse to find a group that it's okay to do the misogyny to. So like structurally, we don't have power, and there'll be no place for us to make anybody feel worse. And even so much as like women are supposed to get around and say shitty things about men, it's a fantasy made up by misogynistic dudes. We're just trying to figure out how to live, man. And so I'm passionate about this because I think this can be misunderstood, and that's fine. We have to just let it be misunderstood and keep it pushing. Like I give up at that point, because like we have to figure out what's holding us back as autistic people, and it's different depending on where you fit in society because we're already social outcasts. It's but you're not marginalized for being white. You're just not, like, at least not a white man.
I'm just
I'm not marginalized for being white because I'm white. But I'm marginalized for being a woman, and that's what we're talking
yeah.
about. Yeah.
And like again, I want to be super clear. I am not saying that I'm doing it because all of those experiences are exactly the same. That's not the case. So one marginalized identity does not make you an expert on all marginalization. That is not how that works, right? So I will never know what it's like to be a person of color. I will never know what it's like to not to be, not be cisgendered. I will never know what it's like to not be a born citizen in this country, let's say, right? Like that's a privilege. I'm a native English speaker. That's a privilege. Like I'm able-bodied. I will never know what that's like to not be able. Like I might actually. That's not true. That's the one that can change. But like, I don't currently know what it's like to be not be able-bodied. So none of that is saying that like you understand everybody's experiences at all. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not the trauma Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
We're not trying to like out trauma each other. It would be a very, I would hope like, yes, you can ask questions. And I think that that's important to ask questions about each other's experiences to understand them better.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a place where those questions that we have are not necessarily what your average person is going to ask. The questions we have are kind of specific to having an autistic brain, right? And you want a place where you can ask some of the questions that don't feel like they would be accepted anywhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in a place where you just have no idea and you can kind of learn about other people's experiences. But we've talked about this in the past, Jane, I think support you were there, like ending up with these kind of little pods and helping people find their little pods of people, right? And I think because ultimately, like this is a big plan for me. Now, I would always want these weekly groups to be free. And that's why I want to just go ahead and start now, because ultimately I would never want them not to be, right? And because I don't have things that are going to make me an income right now, like, shouldn't be the reason that I don't do the thing that I would always want to do for free anyway, right? So that part of it, I would always want to be free. And maybe it's a weekly group, and then you have a weekly group with your little like pod of people, right? Maybe it's breakout rooms during the meeting. I don't know, but if it's more than like 8 people, I think pods make sense, right? And helping people find that, right? Like, not deciding for them, just helping, because it's rough, right? It's hard to do that. And so that's where I am with this right now, and I'm gonna reach out to like I'm gonna probably put something just like how you can touch with me, and like how, what's the timeline on Jane's Discord. I probably put my Instagram in there. Like, I'm gonna reach out on Instagram. I have a couple of other friends that I know, and kind of acquaintances that are autistic women. Another one who's 40 like me, so that's cool. And kind of try and put together and create this together. That's the other thing. I don't have it all together. I'm not the one that's going to like make this all great. I don't have anything to give anybody on a silver platter. But I think if I can, have kind of a core founding group and get a ton of feedback, right? And I think I can make it into something really, really powerful.
Yeah.
And I can't stop. Like, I can't keep just going, oh, but what if nobody wants to do it? Oh, what if people are mean to me about it? Oh, what if, people think it's stupid? Like, I can't do that.
Also, I wanted to just like to close this up too, because I these concerns are good, and I want to address them successfully because they're going to come up. So like, autism specifically has come down to male and female socialization, and they called it extreme male brain theory. They have convinced themselves that we're not able to do quote unquote emotional work or understanding empathy because we're too logical. That's why women couldn't have it, because women are illogical and men are logical, women are emotional, all this wonky stuff. So specifically, the society around us made our disability their battleground over male socialization, female socialization. So we have a serious problem there about the consequences going forward, and we need to this is different because they made it about our sex before we were even able to understand that's what they were doing. Like the ICD, the DSM, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, they made it about sex and in a male supremacist society. So we now live with the consequences of that. And then you can get into other things that are less explicit, but that one was made explicit. So that's why we're talking about this, because it's appropriate and it's what we have to do.
Yeah, and support to your question, like, yes, absolutely. So like, I have specific, that are around my identity. You have specific barriers that are around being trans that I do not understand at all, and I'm never gonna, right? And I think the idea about it not being the Trauma Olympics is just that I see what I found, and I've participated in some other people's support groups in the past, which is, I think, where I'm kind of, but people keep trying to one-up each other. That sounds hard, but guess what I'm doing? That's so much harder. Right. That sounds hard, but guess what? I'm doing this, and it's so much harder. Like, I want there to be a feeling of, we're just going to let everybody's issues and traumas just sit with the group and not be trying to one up each other all the time. And just validate and I know Jane hates that word, but like, ground everybody's trauma and difficulties.
Right. Because
instead of doing that thing.
Otherwise, it's one doesn't cancel out the other, right? Yeah, if we're fighting against each other, we're screwed, because that's why we've been screwed. So I, as a woman, can't very easily, I mean, this is an exceptional space, right? But we still have to police this space from people coming in and wrecking it who just don't care at all about what we're doing. And like, as a woman, there's literally entire religions that say I should be silent. You shouldn't listen to me. I'm not an authority. I like crazy stuff that has influenced this entire process of our disability, which is a physiological reality in our brain, being addressed in society or talked about successfully. That's what's holding us back. So I think it's just important to note that it's going to be about every other thing that comes around that too, that has evolved out of that, but that's like the linchpin in our society, and it affects autistic people specifically. And that wasn't about us being autistic. Like, they've basically used autistic people as props to say, look, these brilliant men really should be ruling the world, and then if an autistic boy has anything going on, it just gets potentially swept under the carpet if you come across as smart. Now you get to be seen as the little, puppet of this society that props up men as leaders and women as unpaid labor and child bearers and all this crap, right? That like isn't
Yeah.
even the dynamic that we actually live in our lives. It's a fiction. So it's a fiction being pushed on top of us, and that the problem is it says that we don't have to hear what happened to females. It's better if a male says what happened.
Yeah. And I think I want like being able to empathize with each other without having to feel like we understand.
Mhm.
I don't need to understand to empathize because, you know, let's say, I don't know, somebody who, let's take it out of identities. Let's say somebody whose mom died, right? I can empathize with that person even though my mom has not died, right? Like someone who's lost someone really close to them. I can empathize with that feeling. I can support that person, but I'm never going to say to them, "Oh, I totally understand because my great aunt Myrtle, who I saw 3 times, died last year," right? Nobody's going to like, I want to honor everybody's specific and very, like, yeah, like exactly. Like, I've never had somebody that close to me die. I just haven't, right? So, like, but I can
Right.
say, oh my God, like, I want to be there for you. And I can empathize with just the idea of grief, even though I will never really understand that grief completely. And that's okay. I don't need to understand. And letting go of that need to feel like we understand, because we won't. I can never, you know? Like, does that make sense? Like,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
All
No.
right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really what I mean by like trauma Olympics.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, and Kyle was saying, yeah, there is the common event, male problem happened to me, female, oh no, are you okay? Caretaking, affect regulation, yada yada. Finding out more about the male, and the male person gets to keep doing that. And then female, problem happens to me. Female, other problem happens to me. Also, problem could happen to me. Like, wait, what is that saying? Now I'm confused.
I need to fix that. Can
Yeah.
I fix that?
Yeah.
It should go. So basically, what happens is usually a male goes like, "Oh, this horrible thing happened to me," or whatever, and then a female goes, "Oh no, are you okay?" Da 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 da. Right. So we'll address it and talk him through it. Right. I typoed, which is severe. On the flip side, when a female goes, "Oh, there's this problem happened to me," da da da. A lot of times a male will. I've seen this so many times where it goes, "Well, this other thing happens to me, and also like the thing that you're complaining about, like that could happen to me too." So um, I've it's all too common, I think, for males. Maybe it's a socialization thing, where if a female says, "Oh, there's this bad thing," not all the time, but often, I notice males will be like, "Well, but what about us? Like we have stuff happen to us too, and also the thing you're describing, like that could happen to me, right?"
Hmm.
Um, it's very rarely like, "Oh, wait, that happens to you guys? What do you mean? Like, tell me about it, right? If you want to." Usually it's like this, well, I have problems too, so you know what I mean by that?
Or it's like, no, that's not what that's from. And like, because this happened because the thing is, this happened to me because of X marginalized identity, white guy. No, that's not why.
Yes.
Completely invalidating
Right. Or
my
even if,
bad idea. No, that's
yeah,
not it. You're being too sensitive. Or it's actually because when I did it, I experienced this. So you couldn't have experienced a different thing.
Right.
Okay.
or
Like,
just this idea that like we're all fully conscious of everything we do, and everybody's like either a really bad person who consciously knows that they're doing this really bad thing to you, or that people are just like doing their best and therefore nothing bad ever happens. We hurt people inadvertently all the time. So if you socialize
yeah,
people to be even worse about that, they're worse about it.
yeah.
Mhm. I think there's also a problem with scale. What do they call that? It's like you're not supposed to like compare traumas or something like that.
Yeah.
Like like okay, a single event can happen to somebody and it like okay, I don't know, you get picked on for being a white dude or something, right? That could happen, but the difference though is that in general you're probably not living in a world where like that is very common / expected. So like if you're a white guy pulled over by a shitty cop and then the cop is shitty to you, etc., like that obviously happens, right? But it really seems to pan out by the numbers that if you're not a white guy, uh, like if you're a black person, you're more likely to be assaulted by the police. If you're a white woman, you're more likely to be coerced into some kind of like, oh, we'll get your ticket canceled if you do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a dude, you're generally not expecting a man to ask you to do that. That's not to say that never happens, but the quantity and the volume is so different. You know what I mean? I think that can become it, and that doesn't erase any bad things that happens to a dude. It's just understanding the reality is that it's like it is living in two different worlds basically.
Yes, it's like living in two. Yes, exactly.
Having to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your privilege is the fact that you can be oblivious and you'll be fine.
I suppose the only exception would be if you're a migrant or an asylum seeker, and
Right.
if sort of people can tell you don't speak
Right.
the language
Yeah.
so easily. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the
So I
whole
think
thing,
that's a lot of like
it's taking advantage. I just want to add that,
not
like
spoken about a lot.
it's
So, yeah.
taking advantage. That's the whole thing, is that we have a system in place where there's hierarchies where people will exploit that, and also people that aren't meaning to exploit that will not do anything to deconstruct it or help anybody. So we end up not able to do anything about this, and when we're talking about it, it's like coming out as a one point. It's like holding onto the tail of the elephant. It's a lot all at once. But the problem is, like, even let's say like right now it's really popular to attack white women, right? Like we can just acknowledge that that's a thing that happens online. Okay, cool. If somebody were to do that, I know they're just going after me for being a woman. They don't give a shit about me being white. That's like not an actual issue in society. That doesn't do
Yeah,
like,
they're just projecting.
yeah, that's something else. That's just like, that's an excuse to take the other shot. So if somebody is a man and somebody wants to abuse them, they have xenophobia basically as a way to do it. That's how they're going to take the shot. So they're picking you for a victim. They're picking you for someone that people can't and won't be able to help, or won't be interested in helping, or will have some other threat where they're not going to help you. Yeah. So that's what it is, and we don't want to get that finger trap stuck on us forever. So it's like, we know that you're not going to be, you're basically, the thing is, this is really tricky to say. So as an autistic person, you're going to have to create your own opportunities in weird ways, and we don't know what those are yet. But we've done that with these other constrictions around us as well. And yes, they've hurt us, and yes, they've caused trauma to us, but I don't share it to like trauma dump. That's the other thing too. It's not like we can process some of the shame and then we just have to accept the reality. So if somebody says like, well, but it's not really the reality, right? It's like, no, that's not going to get us any closer to the goal of saying like, this should happen. Let's get a kind of clear picture of what happened, what's going to happen again, so that we don't mislead people. Like, I wouldn't want little autistic girls to think they're going to be hunky-dory trying to navigate around boys, because they're not.
No. Well, and the other thing too is I think in the long term, right? Like I think that there is certainly a need, and like for us to eventually, for there to also be like people who are trans and autistic, and for them to be able to come together. And that's not my space. It's just not a space for me, and that's okay. Like for people of color who are autistic to come together, like,
yeah,
that's not my space. People who are first generation American, people who are not native English speakers, people who, you know, are immigrant, people who, like, those are all groups that have very important life experiences that would probably come and to be, it would be good for them to come together and have that specific space for them. And it's not my space.
right.
But the space I can create, I think, in a general way. I just didn't want to focus on necessarily just women, but, you know, people with that marginalized identity. I think there's enough shame that we collectively have to unpack, right? Before we, or while we are in our other kind of more specific groups, that, you know, talking about the boundaries and understanding how this boundary may be safe for me, but it's not safe for you, and here's why. And that's okay.
Right.
Like, not okay, but it's what it is right now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm not giving a list of boundaries and saying everyone should have these. That's not reasonable.
I'll give my theory real quick, because I'm a feminist, yada yada, as to why I think this matters and why it makes sense. So basically, this is what you can think of misogyny of, and why I'm bringing that up so much. So it says that males are above females, and then it treats it like race is like a kind of animalistic thing. So they'll say that like a male, if they're not white, are not fully human. They're more like an animal of some kind. They're less evolved
They're
or
more
intelligent.
bestial.
More bestial. Yes, precisely, exactly. So that's why. That's why.
Savage.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
yes.
the word they used to use, savage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was like, we're real people, and you are not. You don't have the ability to be refined in this way.
Right. So,
and that is where that,
and I believe that's due to like colonialism and the civilized white man's burden and all that jazz. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And so like it's really hard, because some people who are like white and male, they're like, oh, is this like a slight against me, or do I need to find some other way that I don't count as the bad person? And it's like, no, but this is an ideology. It's not real. You're not actually anything. You're just in this ideology, and therefore you've been socialized to inadvertently not care about other people enough and center what they're saying. And that's just like, at a certain point, you just have to fucking swallow it and be like, oh shit, yeah, that happened. And I don't know. That didn't happen to me, so I don't know what to do about that either. But it will become a problem in autism, because they centered autism as like part of why men are white males are the superior being.
And I think too, like I've certainly had to do this. Like, if I'm being criticized and it has something to do with me being white, my response is to then go and look at, what am I doing that I don't know I'm doing that is not in support of, like, that is upholding this white supremacist culture. What am I doing then? That's my first instinct. And if men had the instinct of, oh man, what am I doing that's upholding, patriarchy? Let me look at myself. We'd get a lot farther, I think.
I think I found in my experience that some guys do get to the point where they realize, but then often that implies a certain loss of some privileges or rights that one might have, right? Doing some certain lifestyle changes, even the ways that you've acted, or maybe just feeling guilty over certain actions that you've done in the past. But for many, or for some, I mean, it may, they can't make that hard decision sometimes to sort of, I suppose,
Yeah.
take accountability for that.
I have to look at my life and say, I got into a really good college. If I was Black, I don't know that my grades and my everything would have been enough to, you know what I mean, to get me in there. Maybe I got some things in my life, jobs, relationships, whatever, better treatment for no good reason. It wasn't because I deserved it.
Yeah,
And
it's sort of like,
some
yeah,
of it I got because I just
Mhm.
am white. And I have to, figure out how I can move to do things that to make sure that my actions are not supporting the culture that did that.
Right, that's exactly that. Well, I mean, that's what guys naturally do in the system. If they're not clued into what's happening, are you just ongoingly going to reinforce the way that things have always run? Are you going to continue benefiting from the systems the way that they are? Or do you make, some ethical choices to begin
Yeah.
starting to fight for marginalized groups and try to bring in legislative changes? Which is, of
And
course,
it's
harder because when
weird.
you do that, it alienates you from your
Yeah.
former peers and everyone.
That's what we're, I think, scared of, is that alienation, right? We don't want to be out of the powerful group, essentially, because we
Yeah.
have a
Having
survival
to
instinct.
lose. And then also, yeah, the
Exactly.
survival instinct. Because especially at the beginning, when you don't have that experience often of, well, for example, right, when you haven't had the experience of being marginalized, then it's sort of very difficult to bear with the opposition, right? In some ways, you have a
Yeah.
bit of a thinner skin as a result of the lack of exposure.
Yeah. I think so. And I think just to I don't want to down whatever, but if you want to, there are people here that want to kind of get engaged in it or want to have questions about it or whatever. I'm not gonna have this talk at nauseum, but I get people are gonna have questions and stuff. I'm on Jane's Discord, and then my Instagram is autistic.angst, so you can reach out to me there if you want to. And my goal is to kind of get this all put together and started within a month, and just start a weekly group and see where we go. And it's not going to be me just pouring out. It's you're not listening to talk for an hour. That would suck. But I really do want a group of people who want to help me kind of create this and refine it and kind of make it as successful and kind of as helpful and empowering as possible. So that's my I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway spiel.
Yeah, and you should be supported in doing that, and you shouldn't be questioned in oh, are you going to do something supposedly prejudiced or unethical while doing that? Absolutely not. I'm just I started thinking about that, and that really bothered me actually. So you are acknowledging the problem as it stands. The problem as it stands is why it's still standing. The problem is not going to get any better unless you do actions like what you're suggesting. And that was a little bit of a frustrating experience actually. And I don't know, Jamie, are you still here because you stopped replying? And I need this to not happen like this again, because that was not helpful. We have to get people troubleshooting this, and it just has to be, you have to trust people that they know what they're doing if they say that they need something sometimes. And okay, thank you. It's chill, but we have an understanding that this is not about that. It's about the problem that this is imposed on everything, but in particular autism, especially autism. This is literally the clinical diagnosis that they tried to attach males are logical, females are emotional to. you're not locked. You just can't be part of everything all the time, right? Because and it's important to know that. That's the only thing. It's like it won't work that way. But yeah, thank you. Okay, all right.
And feel free to share with people that you think would benefit if you want. Like, I'm not trying to keep it to, in that way. So, okay, that's in there if people want to use it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to talk about a thing real quick because now I'm thinking about it. So, I think maybe that's part of the problem of the employment too, is that we're not saying like what kinds of jobs people are getting. Like, I've been pushed more into like teaching roles, which doesn't make any sense. I don't want to be, but
Everyone around me told me to be a teacher.
Yeah. So even if we are getting employed as women, like what's really happening to us versus what's happening to the men? Seems like men get employed as coders, but women don't. And then there's this idea that we wouldn't have wanted to, even though I excelled at math, but people started ignoring me right away. So then I just switched and started excelling at English because I had already some hyperlexic tendencies. So I just like pushed that all the way. But like, it's frustrating because then how are we supposed to talk about our employment when all of this is actually not neutral at all and it's been split up by male and female? Like, like it's maybe that's part of the problem, is that we aren't able to question that successfully, so autistic people are a victim of that as well.
I think too, it's like, it's fine. I think people are fine with the fact that we don't have jobs.
Yes.
I think they're just fine with it.
Yes, I agree.
Like the same way
Or
that
matters that they don't care, I suppose, because they're concerned with their own concerns, right? Predominantly speaking.
Yeah. And like the way I struggled with math, but that was fine because I was a girl, so and I wouldn't need it anyway.
Right.
I think there's also this element of we still have a cultural expectation that like, well, if she doesn't excel, that's fine because she'll get married and the husband will anyway. Because
she won't need it.
It's a requisite that a man needs to provide, which kind of goes two ways. Like it negatively impacts women. It also does negatively impact men because they're like, if I'm a failure, I didn't provide. That's not a get out of jail free card to then abuse your wife and stuff. Like, I'm the one who provides, you stay home, right? So that one's kind of complicated, but that one does affect men negatively. But again, if we're talking about scale, what ends up happening though is that it seems like if a woman is having a difficulty in something or excels in something or is neutral at something, it doesn't matter because eventually she'll get married anyways. So what's the point, right? That does seem to kind of be changing a little bit, like with girls getting more awards and stuff like that. But I mean, we're not even that old, us in this call, and yet we're still from a generation where it's like, oh yeah, she's good at math, but he's good at math, so we're gonna make sure he gets to.
There must be a natural ability in him. There's something special,
you know what
weird
I mean?
and special about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I will say too, I am very nervous about this entire project.
Yeah, which also is why it's really important to like offer you a lot of support and encouragement and confidence in you, and not anything negative, because screw that. Like, we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
It's completely unnecessary, and you've got the right idea. You've got it mapped out. Our society did not provide us language to talk about this, so that's why this is so challenging as well. But that's the whole problem. It's like our society didn't provide us language to talk about our autism because it wasn't convenient, and it was convenient to our society for our autism to be misdirected as male brain. A male brain. That's crazy. That's what we're like. So
crazy.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing with. And like I have to wonder, on my psychoeducationals, it said that I would be just fine, right? Oh, she should just be fine. But both of them listed how attractive I was. Why did they do that?
That's bizarre.
It
That's
is bizarre.
bizarre.
It happened on both of them. It didn't happen on my brothers. It happened on both of mine. Why did that happen? Did that factor into their decision that I would be fine? Both of my psychoeducationals at 5.5 years old and 12.5, 13, listed that I was attractive.
Wait, what the fuck? Did you
Yeah.
just say 5?
Yes, 5.5. Yes.
Yeah.
I have so many questions.
I know.
And I've seen a lot of psychoeds.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
You know when they say like the
I've read a lot.
observations, the physical observations, that's where they put it. They put it in that section. Yeah.
She's a cute little girl,
What the fuck?
but I've never seen one say, "Oh, he's a handsome little
Like,
boy." Some woman will come along and, I mean, they don't say it like that, but it's like she was really polite and soft-spoken, and
Yeah.
she had manners, and like those
Mhm.
things are just pointed out a lot in girls that aren't
Yeah.
pointed out.
Well-mannered was pointed out, polite was pointed, all that. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. I think they wrote
And
me
mine
down
was
as
like-
agreeable
Which
at one
I feel
point.
like, I was about to say, which
Right.
I feel like being mannered and polite sounds like code for pliable and agreeable, right?
Yes.
because
Yeah.
it is. Right.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
It's
Well, I'm
code
just
word for
saying,
that.
it's
Yeah.
sort of like,
it's
I didn't have that in my psychometric test, but it's definitely what I feel like my whole family and a lot of the culture, they said that. And as a kid, you don't know. You just think that you're doing things right, but what it actually means is that you're not causing trouble otherwise, right?
Mhm.
Right.
correct. That is
That's what I
actually
think.
what it means.
But Jane, all this
Well-
is just reminding me of that video. Remember the one about the evolutionary psychology that Mooncat did? It sounds like a lot of people still, they believe in that sort of bullshit.
I want to touch back on a couple of sentences ago, if that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I mean, I don't know
I
if I
think-
get to say yes, but
I'm sorry.
never mind. I thought I said yes, and I was like, oh God, do I get to decide that? But sure, I'll just decide that.
You get to decide. I just
Okay.
made the decision as a man that you get to decide as a woman.
Awesome. Thanks, Cal.
No, I was gonna say to what Ro was saying. I think so. There's the thing about the pliability. I don't disagree with that, but I kind of want to hammer the point. I think it extends beyond that, because when they're looking at women, part of the whole manners thing is so you can find a good man,
Mhm.
right? It's a little bit different when they say like, oh, he'll find a good woman someday, right? But that doesn't mean he needs to be like that polite. He just needs to be able to like do the gentleman thing during the courting phase, and then after that, it doesn't matter because he owns her, right? Whereas she needs to continue to be polite and helpful and not
Mhm.
speak up, right? Because
Mhm.
at some point he has to take charge anyways, right? So as long as he's not bickering with me, the authority figure, I don't care what he does to the other people, just like I don't care what I do to these other people.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to highlight that although, probably in general, they're looking for like, oh yeah, you polite kid, da, da, da. If there's a conversation about pliability, like I'm sure that's there, but I think we have to keep in mind too that
No, I agree. This is a very good
I think
point.
with- I
It's
think when
just-
it
it's
comes
reminding
down
me of
to the
something.
woman, I think, yeah, no, for sure. And I'm not, this is not a call out by any chance, or by any means. It's simply because of what this particular space is. I think that when there's any opportunity that we have to remind ourselves that it's kind of panned out across all sectors, all demographics, et cetera, again, this isn't to make men feel bad or anything like that. I'm a man, and I'm not trying to make myself feel bad either, or anyone else. But generally speaking, when a demographic of people are facing XYZ mistreatments, in general, the women in that demographic are going to have XYZ mistreatments, plus
Mhm.
there are ones that they're getting mistreated because they're a woman. And so I think any opportunity to think about it, like, okay, that extends to everyone in general, but does it also extend to women in a specific way? Say the specific thing, because not because of anyone in particular being malicious or anything like that, but because culturally we skip over it. So that's why I bring it up when it comes up. So it's not like you didn't say that right. I think what you said was correct.
Mhm.
No, it's just this is a very good point because it just gave me an insight. I think the difference for women, this is just something that I've been listening to in a video by ContraPoints on Twilight recently. It's just very random, but I think it's a holdover from Victorian society. And I think the sort of structures that were placed on women around sort of like being kind of like, the sort of purity culture around like how women should be right before marriage and whatnot. They shouldn't have any desires. They should be sort of like devoid of any sort of like expression. And so I think like that whole like the whole idea of being refined, of having manners and all that, I think was sort of kind of molded for the effect of basically not leaving broken, empty marriages, you know, potentially that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my brain just broke
think,
there at the end for a second, so maybe I articulated it kind of badly. Apologies.
No, I think you're fine. ContraPoints is cool in my opinion. She gets a little bit stuck on like she'll go to a time frame and then kind of situate the whole world based upon that. I mean, Victorian England, that's not the only place in the world that had women have to do manners. Like that's like an ancient, like that's like found in like ancient China. Like Sun Tzu decapitated an entire group of concubines because two of them started laughing. Or no, he decapitated two of them because they started laughing when he was trying to prove his point. Sun Tzu was trying to prove his point to this lord that he can teach anyone how to fight. And then these two chuckled, and then he had them decapitated so everyone else would fall in line. Like this idea that women need to be supportive to men is way beyond Victorian England. So ContraPoints doesn't bother me that much, but sometimes she'll situate the entire world based on like some historical thing that she's interested in. That's kind of one of my problems with her. Sometimes they're just like, yeah, that's good, but you're in school too long. You make too many essays. You gotta look at everything.
No, I agree with you. I do think it's
and be careful.
Yeah.
And to her, I would say, not to you, but to her, I would say, like, be careful of being too Eurocentric, because these problems that we're trying to describe, it's more than just King Henry decided this. It's like, yeah, well, you know, he did that because that was already there. It's been there for a long time.
You're right. Yeah, I suppose I took something that somebody said from a very hyper-specific context, and I think I applied it more broadly, which is my mistake. So thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you bringing up this point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I was saying in the chat, like basically like there's a structure. They struggle who isn't their entry into. Well, so I understand that you're struggling, and I'm okay. So let me just situate what I was going to say here. So I acknowledge that, and I think it's clear when you say that you will be acknowledged for what you are sharing, right? We acknowledge that is a true and accurate statement. Okay, so we cannot change the structure that produced that unless if we do one of two things. Thing one, navigate structure is. I'm nothing the knowledge you do, nor do I want to. Okay, yeah, just support that. Yeah, that's good. And then everybody wins at the end of the day, because nobody can address the actual problems they're having, because we're supposed to have the problems that this ideology says we're having. I'm not supposed to have the problems I'm having. I'm supposed to have lady problems. You know, so we're supposed to have different brains with different capabilities, and that is not what's happening. Autism, there actually is a difference in our brain, and it's not being addressed appropriately because we've been used as poster children for this ideology, because the ideology said, oh, they talk like little logic robots. Oh, good, excellent. See, males are very good at logic, math, wah wah woo. Like, so that's crazy, and that's why we're talking about it, and why I'm bringing it up, and why I needed to situate this strongly. So I appreciate your support. I hope it's clear, even though it's difficult to talk about, but it can't matter. And I appreciated this conversation because it made me think about like how much of our under and unemployment is based on our treatment based on sex specifically, outside of like other concerns about people who are not supposed to be considered for jobs because of immigrant status or other xenophobic issues, or in specifically America, white supremacy against Black people that extends out to anybody who doesn't get considered white. But even outside of that, I still feel like the central thing, because they're not allowed to do, like, none of the sciences, none of the religions are allowed to do phrenology anymore, or like freaking eugenics around race. Like, they're not allowed to do race eugenics anymore, right? Like, that's like uncool, but they still are completely allowed to do this shit around male and female with almost no pushback. And if you get pushback, it doesn't count. It's toothless. I mean, they do place females below in the Bible. Like literally, they literally just say that females are not even saved until they have a baby. Like females go to hell unless they have a baby. That's in the Bible. Yeah. Yeah, buddy. And also we're not supposed to we're literally inferior. We're literally not we are wives that produce babies, and we need to just follow what men tell us to do, and that's how to be saved after you have a successful pregnancy. So, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, so, right. So we just can't escape that, and it sucks, and it's so pervasive that it's like this. We're fish, that's the water. We'll never feel wet because we've been in the water the whole time, and it's that bad. And then when you know that, you'll be fine with the rest of the shit. It's just a given. It's just a given. It's just forever, and it sucks. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So, now how to dissect employment and misemployment.
Oh, also, sorry, just not a lot of things. Just I'm currently like creating the Discord that I want to use for meetings and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So just within like, I'd say once I get a group of 5 or so, I'm gonna open that up and we'll get it started. But we'll see how long that takes.
Great.
Probably
Excellent.
not too long because
awesome.
Instagram is already like kind of overwhelming me.
You know what? One thing I think is a good point here. This was I brought this up in my studying feminism with like an actual like course, which is pretty cool. So our homes are designed wrong. Just like point blank, they don't work for autistic people. They don't work for ADHD people. They don't work for a lot of people. But we have this standard home with standard appliances. Those are built on the idea that women will have a certain role in life, that they'll be doing the laundry and cooking the dinners. So the kitchen looks like that. The laundry room looks like that. The way the rooms are organized, where you flow from one to the other, it looks like you're going to have a woman at home doing this domestic labor. These are domestic labor bins that we have been chucked into. And as it turns out, they don't meet our needs because you're not supposed to, because mommy is supposed to do that. Holy shit, right? So
could you elaborate a bit on that, Shane, and how
yes,
spatially that works?
Yes, I can. So you have a house, right? A standard American home, and it's been reproduced like tiny boxes on the hillside, ticky-tacky all the way. Okay, so if you think about what are the things that are the most frustrating to do when you're trying to clean a space, if you look at like apartments, right? When they get to be more popular amongst males, suddenly you have more studio apartments. I don't think that's a goddamn accident. I think taking care of multiple rooms with multiple purposes that are supposed to have a design aesthetic that matches the multiple purposes, when really it's just a plain, empty, stupid box that then you have to buy shit to put in, right? None of this is functional. They used to have cutaways into houses, right? But I think the materials they used maybe ate them up, et cetera, et cetera. But once you started to go for functionality, they started building all of these damn studio apartments because dudes were living in them. Like, you having in every room that's just focused on your special interests might even make more sense. We don't even question that. We don't even question it. But if like, for example, if you have it out of sight, out of mind, and you're ADHD, you're not going to clean it. Your best chance is to have a studio and to have the whole thing be open. Like, they put open floor offices around places. So even for the preferences that we may have, we don't really get to explore them fully or question the layout of the buildings. The layout of the buildings were built around having a woman at home. Like, just they were. And in some instances, they were built around having like a servant. So you can probably do a really good analysis of how the homes progressed in England. So I just thought about this and realized, oh, yeah, I could probably spend the rest of my life studying that and get a really deep sort of, interpretation of the whole thing. But people don't think about architecture like that. The architecture of offices has been changing and updating every 5 or 10 years. The offices that are built today look nothing like the offices in the 90s, 80s, even the early 2000s. So you can get that updated, but not homes? Why not? Have we not significantly changed how we live? Why don't the homes reflect that? Oh, because you can just get a woman in there, throw her around the whole place, and she has to do this endless task of trying to make this stupid thing run, which takes all day.
Thank you for sharing. Do you mean like as in the so obviously having the semi-compartmentalized space in the house, but it's
Yeah.
only one person taking care of that, where it's
Yes.
not obviously shared
Yes,
roles. Yeah,
it's not
okay.
shared. And even think about how compartmentalized it is. It would be hard to even communicate the rules across two people. So this
Yeah,
woman
that's a good
is
point.
stuck memorizing all of these weird little nooks and crannies and how you're supposed to take care of these things that have different requirements. Like, why don't I have a chute that I just throw my clothes into at the end of the day that goes to the laundry? Why am I walking around back and forth into, like, why isn't the laundry right next to my closet? That would make more sense. Oh, the laundry's too loud. Couldn't we make a quieter machine by now? I don't know.
I think
Literally anything
right.
different.
I think it's a capitalistic thing of, because I've seen some comments by architects online, students as well, where they say that they often have lots of ideas to do unique builds, but they've got no control around what plans are chosen when new buildings are made. So I think it sounds like it's also a matter of like completely cutting corners in terms of how much investment in money and resources they do
Why would you
to
invest?
charge as much as possible.
Why would you
Yeah.
invest in something that you get the labor out of for free? Why would you do that? Women are free labor. Why would you make their homes any nicer if they're going to do it for free anyway? There's no incentive to do it. There's an incentive to do it for the workplace. They don't care about women's productivity because they don't want to monitor it or even count it as part of the economic system when it obviously is holding it together. Like, so the role, not that like there aren't men who step up and have the role of a father that's more akin to what mothers are doing, but neither of these roles are good, even like even in isolation,
Yeah.
or even when they try to switch and swap places. These are stupid roles. They're stupid. It's unpaid labor that's being extracted from people at the lowest possible, cost to the government, and it's being paid for now in all of our psychiatric issues. And so it's this big of a problem. So yeah, it's awesome to hear that like people who are trying to do work in architecture are considering the home, but the reason why it's not being considered is it's the workplace of women who are having to do complete like uncounted labor to make all of our society run as badly as it sometimes is running, but they're making sure that people are fed, clothed, hygienic, going to doctors, being put through educational systems that then pop them out, which we're kind of like duds in a sense if we are autistic, but still we still got carted around and put through all that stuff. For what? For why? To contribute what? I hate the whole damn thing. The schools were built by prisons. Like, that's crazy. Like, so you have buildings that those don't even make sense. And so you don't have a chance to say my environment is just wrong. My environment is based on something that people have imposed on family units. That's weird. And we never get to like the brass tacks of questioning that because it's weird to question it. But for me as a disabled person, like I just have to, because this clearly is stupid. This is a stupid design. And I don't know where to go with it from there except to say that it's just stupid. But yeah.
I think it's very interesting because I myself, in some ways, I'm kind of curious. So the discussion between like how a space is shaped and say you have autism or other, instances of neurodivergence, is it that a certain manner of compartmentalization doesn't work for us? I'm trying to sort of like figure it out.
It needs to be flexible.
In my own space.
Yeah, we need flexible compartmentalization, which is what I was talking about the studio. The studio, you can keep changing up how things mean and what they mean. So what we would need, like for example, if I like just some things off the top of my head, storage underneath the floor. That would be great. And then you can have like storage sections, and you can even have them labeled. And then that means when you're in this area of the room, you work on that task, and you can get all your materials from that area of the room. So we need to be able to commit spaces, I think, to our interests and our projects and know that we're going to do that in that area, but still have the flexibility potentially to adjust our projects as we go forward or change what they require. But we need a storage space that lives where the project lives. That's why I love ballet. You go to the ballet studio, it's all there. Great. Yay. So we need to build stations. And so we need storage in the home that reinforces the fact that this is a station.
And then also separating things that when it comes to work, that it has to be separate from the house itself even completely, right?
Yeah, more than likely. We need more separation with that. I think that's almost certainly true.
I personally find it very difficult to, if I don't have that separation, I just tank in terms of being able to do anything.
Right, which is what like some people use like third space coffee shops to try to accomplish, and we probably should have something like that too. I know like the WeWork thing, again, WeWork, like, or like any of those things that are like communal workspaces that you can just rent a pass key for. They are innovating for that. But once it comes back to like, oh, if you're at home, like at home, it doesn't mean your lab. It should be your laboratory. That's what your home should be. For women, for men, for kids, it should be your laboratory, in my opinion. And that's what's not happening.
I suppose it's like, what do people mean by home? What does home really mean as a concept?
Great question.
What ought it to mean as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think a home for a disabled person has to mean something different. It has to mean the place where your disabilities are less of an issue, as little as possible of an issue, so that when you go outside and people can't make it not an issue, it's not as big of a problem. It's not a continuous, everlasting problem. So it's a little bit of a sanctuary, as well as a place to build up your skills, so when you go outside, you're valuable despite the fact you're disabled. That's what I think it should be. And you know, as well as, you know, getting to do other specific training in other places. But now that we have a lot of classes that you can take from home, like you can even study physical skills now from home pretty well. So we should be doing that. So our home should be a place where our disability is less impactful, so that we can deal with the world where it's just going to be more impactful. But then I don't see why we have to deal with cultural baggage on top of that limits the imagination and makes it impossible for us to do things that would help our disability to be mitigated in the home. So, you know, it's like, it's so expensive to try to do anything, let alone, you know, something innovative. But
like trying to build your own house from scratch, right? Basically, with the materials and stuff.
To remodel it, and to, you know, it'd be nice to have some like disability minded architects in the future pushing for this. But then what we'll need to have is some sort of voucher system, or we'll have to. I like the idea that
because you can also imagine that any builders that you'd have to hire to do more specialized work would also be more expensive to hire in terms of fees. Yeah,
exactly. And these are not ready-made materials, so that's more expensive. So there's all these costs associated with it. But at this point, it's like, well, but then the productivity would go through the roof. But we would have to then recognize that homes are factories. We'd have to recognize they're production factories. They produce value for the society. They produce many kinds of things.
And that's the other question, right? Yeah. I'm sure you've heard the thing about the separation of the first, second, and third spaces, home, work, and social environments. You know, ought a home, you know, be so, I suppose, geared up to become a factory? But then it depends, right? Because if you're disabled and if you're autistic, you do have to bring yourself to a level where you can function. So on the one hand, I get it, but at the same time, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm pushing myself so hard to try to basically catch up to being, at least, I suppose, seen as more, well, less disabled, as it were, externally, right? To show that I'm more capable of doing things. Mm-hmm. But then if I'm trying to do that in the house, it mixes up with way too many difficult and heavy emotions. And then I just crash. And then I just think, well, hold on. The house should be a place where I should be able to breathe and relax. Like often I just find I don't have the peace of mind to just play a game sometimes, or just to relax, or to socialize in the house.
Because I think there's baggage from the society. Well, there's unfinished work from you going around in society that you know you need to catch up. So like an autistic person, we literally need more time to finish assignments, not that we're given it, but especially when you get into the work environment and suddenly you're on the clock, and how are you going to get time from nothing? right? So, but we need more time to finish many kinds of tasks. So by the time we get home, we're probably nowhere near done. And so then our homes need to have like what you're talking about, where you can feel you can successfully relax, but also successfully complete the work that you need to do to keep up with people who are not disabled. And that is totally okay for us to say, because like our production is slower because we can't pretend to be in social places that we can't even see. So we have to actually produce the damn work. So then we need to be productive at home. And it's not that we wouldn't enjoy doing that and know where a stopping point is. But if you're fighting with your environment, like Kyle's helping with the reason why HouseCat came up, like Kyle's helping me with right now and living here, and we're going to really push to like redo things here. And I'm asking a lot from him, but he's able. I was so screwed before I started this HouseCat thing. Like I was living in just a pile of garbage. I don't know what else to call it. And deteriorating rooms that nobody was touching.
Floor in a box.
Yeah.
Remember when you sat in a box?
I did sit in a box. I did, because I didn't know how to get a chair yet, because I never had ordered a chair for myself. Because like, you know, we don't get to those milestones like normal people, because we can't unbury ourselves from all the work that we didn't get any help with.
I have a question for you, Jane. Maybe you can help me with a small matter. So my support worker's coming in tomorrow, you know, that I have just to help me out with some of the difficulties with autism and get her free hours every week.
Yes.
I've been kind of a bit lost as to how she's also been at a bit of a wit's end on how she can help me, because often, like, let's say I've got things around the house, but then when I'm trying to clean up or help myself, it's often very idiosyncratic, or the way that I do it, like the order, is very particular, and it's difficult. Like, I'm not used to having somebody else help in, right? But then you're describing the situation where you've had, you know, Kyle help you over time. Has that really kind of, I don't know, have you found ways to sort of like, I just don't even know what I'm asking.
So I would say have her introduce systems where there's no system. Right? So rather than have her redesign the system that you're noodling on for a reason, I would have her work on the areas that you're more blind to, that you're like, you could either currently care less about, or like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I suppose some of that stuff would be like filling in some paperwork, for example, right? I struggle with that. But I'm almost a bit like, I wouldn't know how to ask her to do that. It's like, can you fill me this paperwork for me? She'd also look kind of weirdly at that. I guess maybe I can convince her to do that.
Tell her it's the most critical thing. Like, you can tell, like on the authority of me, but also that's something that I talked about with Andrew Vogel, like who's an autism specialist that just works with adults. We're so bad at paperwork. If she can just do the paperwork, you would be so much better off. That's probably one of our main disability supports that we need, is somebody to just fill in paperwork as if they were us. And if they absolutely need to find something, they can ask us for it, but we're probably going to be stressed out and just be okay with that. Filling in paperwork, tidying up spaces that are currently dysfunctional that you're not using at all. And that's probably the best two things that would make the biggest impact, that would consistently stack up. Answering your mail.
Like, she's got a car. Yeah, because we take the car sometimes to pick up some errands and stuff like that around the city, which is good as well, because I don't have a car.
That's great.
So,
mail, appointments, maybe even talking about, well, if she notices like a thing that needs to get done, explaining how neurotypicals think things get done, like even just having some insight so you can understand what you're up against can be helpful. Like even her just sharing her confusion about why you would need help with this is helpful, because we get discriminated against in workplaces for this. Like, why can't you just do it? It's like, well, I'm disabled. I don't know, man. Like, why can't? Go ahead.
I suppose she's not even that often like confused per se. So she has her son's autistic, right? He's been diagnosed since he was a kid. It's more so she sometimes gets frustrated, and I think maybe I'm part of the issue, because often I sense that, and then I get this resistance to ask her for help sometimes. Sometimes she has bad days. She's went through like some personal stuff with bereavement, you know, her dad died recently, stuff like that. And you know, it's just hard to know when to come in, because then like I don't know where like the boundaries lie of, figuring out when you should ask for a specific type of help, if it's the right, if the room is right to do that or not. I just struggle with that
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, well, that's a given. That's interesting that she has a son. So I hope she gets used to it, because like you're always gonna be
The son
like
is
that.
actually in California, funnily
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Oh hell
but-
yeah. That's what's up. Yeah. So okay. So if you're not sure if she's okay to deal with a
Mhm.
specific request, you can phrase it as like, hey, I'm gonna always need help with this because I'm always disabled in this way, but I don't
Right.
know if this is a problem for you because I'm disabled in it. So I don't know when it's a problem for anyone, because I've never had it, fluctuate from
I see.
ability to disability. You just are disabled at it. So even talking to her about like, I don't know where your boundaries or limits are around this because I don't get to even know what those are, like as a concept, because you have a disability. So your relationship with this task isn't I can do it now and I can't do it later. It's you've never been able to do it, but you can try to pretend that you can if you're about to face like eviction. Like very different.
Yeah.
So yeah, just situating as like you want to be considerate of what she can take on that day, but that you've noticed
Mhm.
one of your areas of impairment is probably about to be a problem in
Yeah,
your life.
thank you for this. I suppose like like if it's any serious like bills or stuff like that, I tend to do it because often I get scared and I do a last minute sort of a situation. But often it'll be like, you have to do this questionnaire. And there'll be like, I'll say that, oh, I can do this in my own time because sometimes it would have to be answering private questions.
Right.
But then I'll have other stuff happen in my life, and then like 5 months passes, and that questionnaire is still not done.
Yeah.
And then I worry about it, and I need help. So like I'm not sure how to
Yeah.
approach that.
I think if there's questionnaires that are private questions, I have some stuff like this. If she can just do everything minus those questions,
Right.
help you get through
Yeah,
that,
that's
and
the
then
best she can do.
yeah, and then review like what the questions that you need to answer, like say them out loud so that you
Mhm.
know what those ones are, and then if you need to talk out any problems that you might have answering those, you can say it out loud at the time. And if she has any insights or helpful, it wouldn't necessarily be tips, but like if her instincts as somebody who's able, her sharing what
Mhm.
she would do is helpful for you to come up with a game plan and kind of better support yourself to do
Yeah.
the rest of it on your own, then that's good too.
That's great. I've just got one final brief question there. I saw you did a thing in terms of ChatGPT, and you found a way, I think it was like summarize videos to give specific points about what they're about, and then also check if they're like accurate based on certain metrics. So I just want to confirm, because I'm just ignorant of this, can ChatGPT take a current video and analyze it? Does it do that?
Yes, it can.
Or AI systems?
If you
Okay.
have I think if you just have even the free subscription, it'll do it, but it will pop up in the corner of YouTube. So it's like already integrated into YouTube on just any browser as far as I know.
Oh, I
And
see.
you can just click it
I
at
don't
the
see
top.
it because I have the ad block on. But
Oh, yeah. I think you can possibly try linking it to the 4.0 or whatever one, and maybe it'll also do it from there. And then you can ask it to assess it. I usually do literacy, and it uses like a standard literacy. I forget the main one it uses, but it's just a thing that
You've
like
got a thread about it.
yeah.
I'll just follow the instructions that you have there. Thank you.
Yeah, that saves a ton of time. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess it's also good for us to look at our environmental challenges or like our management challenges and say like, okay, well, I'm never going to be good at that. All right. So it's just going to have to be kind of shitty and done for now, hoping to build towards the environment that actually does support us sufficiently so that we don't have to do things up to shitty and done level. But for now, I'll take shitty. I'll take, like I'm impaired and nothing is addressing my impairment. So this is what it looks like. It's better than the alternative, even though it's not what I would have hoped for. I think there's maybe some space to say that too. But also like the idea that like you don't have to fill in a form in the order the form is written, right? That the form is arbitrarily
Sure.
designed by an allistic person's mind, and you can ignore all of, like, basically, like, you know, like coloring outside of the lines. What can work is like just color anywhere you want. Like, all that matters for us is that we keep trying to color in. We can't see the lines, so who cares? And if someone's like, did you know that you colored out of the lines? I'm like, cool, well, it was that or a blank piece of paper. So which would you have preferred? And so don't worry about sequencing. It's better for us to try and come up with a way for us to do things than to do nothing. Knowing that we are not working towards doing it neurotypically. That's impossible. And anyone who thinks that it is possible, I would take major issue with. I think that's just wrong and also deeply unhelpful for our psyche. So just like do make contact with it. Like go back to the congenitally blind metaphor that I use so often, or analogy, because it's analogous. Actually, it's like if we're making something congenitally blind color in pieces of paper all day, fine. I don't care. They're going to color in the desk. They're going to color in nothing that you told them to. But if we can just get down to, okay, well, but you said I have to color things in to be in society. All right, I'm going to color in 70 things. And just sheer volume of things, you're going to have to let me through, because look at the damn effort. And I do think that will work. I think, like, even just on the fact that
here's I suppose like a quandary, right? So let's say you've come from obviously the system where you've been conditioned that you have to color, in the lines, and they'll tell you this is the only way that you can do this, or that it's acceptable.
Right.
Then you get the realization that I cannot do this. I am disabled. And so I've had the situation where, of course, people tell you, I tell myself that I just have to accept that I can't do these things like holistic people. I can't do these things in a certain way. I just have to forgive myself and then try to kind of better things in my own situation, doing things my own way. But often I find that I'll say that to myself, but emotionally I can't get away from the tendency to try to keep push to fix, to still try to kind of get it right by the lines. Like there's almost like this internalized sort of this like sort of like desperation to always try to kind of like fit in.
Yeah, well, and we can't. So the problem is, even when we think we're coloring in the lines, we're not. So that's what we should let go of, is the idea that we could ever actually even see if we were doing it right or not. We can't. That's how not able to perceive this stuff we are. So then that's why I'm saying I think the solution is just volume. Just flood them. Like if what would you do if somebody said, like, oh, you need to color in this paper, and then the person turns in 100 colored in papers that are all kind of getting weirder and weirder as time goes on, but none of them are right, but they did 100 of them. Like, it's like, I actually think the human brain responds to that sympathetically. Even like holistic people, I don't think they get annoyed by that. And I think eventually we actually come up with our own method.
I like how the first thought that I had in mind was like, they look at that and they'd be like, this person is really strange, it'd be concerning, like, images of sort of having like a neurological disorder or something.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, initially, yes, but that's why we have to advocate for ourselves and say, like, the reason I'm doing this is you won't change the rules. I have to turn in the colored piece of paper. Okay, so I'm going to color in the pieces of paper. I can't do what you're telling me to do, but you're going to see that, like, I'm sincere that I can't do this. Look at me not being able to do it 70 times in a row. Do you think a sane person would do that on purpose when I'm self-aware that I have a disability? So this is why the disability language is, I think, incredibly empowering. So we can say, like, look, this isn't the best I can do. This is the task you gave me to do. The best I can do is a totally different task. But if you insist on me getting a paycheck this way, or me, being socially acceptable this way, or me proving that I should be accepted into your program this way, here you go. And here's a paragraph about me being self-aware that this is hot garbage, but I cannot actually interface with this. Fun fact, that's the world you actually live in, neurotypical person. Bet you didn't know that. So we're doing them a favor by cluing them into the fact that there's a kind of disability that they're blind to themselves. They have a blind spot to, because they don't have any concept of not having these skills. Like all of the forms, all of the procedures, all of the requests are built on having those skills. So we could not develop them. That is why we don't have them. So this is what it looks like when a person actually genuinely doesn't have those skills and somebody keeps demanding it. It's like, well, fine. I'm not doing the bare minimum. I'm doing the maximum of what I can do that doesn't drive me crazy, while accepting that this is all I can see of the system that is completely like impenetrable to me because of a disability.
Right. I suppose the trick would then be to try to kind of put all that in sort of a simple and efficient just terms so that a list of people would understand that.
Yes.
I don't know, I find that they're very resistant.
100%.
Extremely resistant, and
and again, and that's why I think it's maybe that's also a volume thing. If more of us have a concept of this and we just keep saying it over and over again, that like we literally can't do that. And in fact, and it's not an excuse to do nothing. We're not being lazy. We're not then going to sit on our butt. We're not ridiculing the system, because that's what I kind of got, was this idea that I was trying to be contrarian or something. I'm like, no, you said I have to do this. This is all I can see of what you're talking about. Here you go. And sometimes it was really positive because I have other skills. So, the asset is there's other kinds of skills that they also don't have language for, that we also have, that other people outside of us do appreciate. So we're not just turning in something that's meaningless. We're turning in stuff that has meaning, but it's not the meaning they were expecting to receive, because they didn't understand that people make meaning in a radically different way when they have a disability like autism, and that they can also understand the kind of meaning that we make. So we should be allowed to make the meaning that we can with the tasks that we're given. So if you have permission to do that, I think that's probably our best bet. And then if you tried and I tried, maybe, like we're all trying it, there may be a way to communicate this to autistic people. And if not, then it's like, well, at least we know we're not crazy. Like if they want to be ignorant, then that's on them.
Yeah, you're right. It has to be some sort of a group advocacy on our part, because then otherwise it'll it's easier to deny if it's just one person coming to your doorstep, with grievances as they would see it, versus like 10 or 20.
Yes. Right. Describing the same phenomenon.
Yeah. Can I just also briefly ask, you brought this point in like one of the another session, right? This idea about value and meaning. You've said that like, with autistic people, the notion of value is almost nonsensical because of the circular nature to it, right? Something is valuable because it simply is, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I still was trying to, I guess, I would ask if you can maybe elaborate on, okay, what is meaning then? How can we construe it, from an autistic perspective?
Meaning means that it provides information about the universe you live in. So it's meaningful in that it has a sense or logic to it that reflects the sense or logic of the broader universe. Therefore, you're learning the principles or properties of the universe that you live in. And therefore, when something else occurs, you're putting it into the context of the universe you live in. So for us, meaningful is referring to that process of understanding a structural environment and how the structures interface with each other, and why. Why is like the natural laws like physics and stuff. So we're constantly trying to understand, like, what does this mean given what I already know about the world that I think I live in. And it's something that's meaningful has lots of clues. So it's a richer example of the universe and the laws and things that you either know and need to reinforce, and it's a better reinforcing of what you already were starting to understand, or it's something new that you were missing that like is extremely valuable to the structures you've already modeled in your head. So for us, it's improving the model by giving us better information as far as we can perceive it with our sense organs and then process with our brain about the universe we live in. For them, it's the people think it's a good thing because the people went there. And since the people went there, it's a good thing because when people go to a place, it's probably a good thing, which is a nice heuristic, but it's hierarchical. So that's why it's
Oh, right.
circular.
That's what I was going to ask about. The I suppose like yeah, a written explanation for the doing as arriving versus the doing as building model. That's what it was. I just
Oop.
remembered. Yeah.
And Enigma has a point about communicating to holistics, if this is a good time to pop in.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about like where these things get stuck. Yeah, and a lot of times I see people running into the same thing where they try to explain to their manager or like in an education system, and then they like basically get kicked out or punished before they're able to find language that works.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, they're in a ton of spaces like this, usually not as thoughtful ones, having lots of conversations, which also take energy, often being exposed to other people's dysregulation when
Mm-hmm.
like we're all kind of stuck together and hearing lots of stories about what doesn't work more than what does. Um, so I've been thinking, like, I really like this point about kind of aggregating examples that it's not just one person and it's like lots of different people. Now, I don't know how many allistics, especially in positions of power, would be willing to read that, but I do think that, like, something that I really wished for. Now, again, if we try to build something like this, it might or might not work, but just like the thing that I really hoped for that I could have had instead of having to go to a bunch of support spaces and kind of like I hate to say compete with what everyone else wants to talk about, but like when something is that burning, like I could lose this ability to make income in the next 2 weeks if I don't figure that out. I am in that kind of mindset. And what I really would have liked to engage with at that point, rather than lots and lots of autistic people, is like a map kind of like where I could search for the kind of challenge that I'm running into, like where I'm getting stuck, and then hear what lots of people have said over time about that. Maybe I'll see like 5 different people have their own explanations for it, and maybe some of them have ways of communicating about it that did work. Maybe other people haven't found ways of communicating about it that worked, but even just seeing how they communicate in this map document thing, I could see like, okay, maybe if I explain this, that might land with this person versus this other one, like this person I know probably wouldn't get it, but at least like a library of options. And then like I could come to spaces like this and talk more specifically. Like, okay, I'm thinking about maybe using something like this, unconventional paths, like whether it's entrepreneurs or like neurodivergent people, we like have to just, if the neurotypical way doesn't work for us. So I've been thinking about a lot about like what works in that realm, what hasn't been, what mentorship relationships that work for us could be like. But yeah, that's all just like food for thought.
It makes me think too, like people do actually quite well looking up medical issues they're having, that they have some guidance. Like if they're totally in the dark, no, but like somebody gets diagnosed with something, there's really good Reddit forums for it where people are sharing experiences of like managing symptoms or the process of a treatment or whatever. So that makes sense to me that we could have something like that, that it could also have some amount of searchability where it consolidates things that may not be obviously connected, because a lot of what we're doing is talking about things that don't have categories yet. Like we're
Yes.
yeah. So it'd be nice to have something that flags that and starts to find what's in common that we're already fixing or coming up with some options about.
Oh yeah. One thing that I'm really excited to see at some point, I'm like, this has to be a thing somewhere, is just like there are AIs being built to like aggregate sentiments on platforms like Discord, or I'm sure it could be applied to Reddit or what have you, because when everything is a new conversation, it basically goes to like the affect first aid level, and then people are drained already
Yeah.
because like you can't get to the solutioning level, which is why I like don't hang out much on autism Reddits, because it's a lot of people who are like at the panicking self-hatred point in their journey, and like I don't want to be
Let's not say
engaging.
terminally online.
Oh, sorry, what did you say?
I'm saying, like, sort of jokingly, terminally online, right?
Mhm.
The term that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so there's that, and then there are like the people at the point of kind of reducing challenges. Like, for example, one in my neurodivergent entrepreneurs group, something that multiple folks who are ADHD, like whether or not they're autistic as well, brought up is challenges staying focused, and like when they're basically, they kind of describe it as boredom. But then I'm thinking, is that really like the main issue? Okay, why are they talking about that in an entrepreneurship group then? Why hasn't some other ADHD group somewhere with, there's so much um out there on how to be not bored? Why did that not work and they like made it here? I think there's probably something else going on, like in my experience, where I don't know where to start on things. Or like I feel like the efforts might be in vain, or like certain kinds of work is dysregulating for me. And I like don't feel like bringing in a bunch of people and being like, yeah, okay, we're hearing this boredom challenge. Let's have a conversation about it. Because they're all kind of like saying the same things, and I feel like there's something happening underneath that they're all like not aware of, but that I'd need more perspectives on what's happening underneath before I'd feel that a conversation like that would add more value than we're not alone and confirming that boredom is the issue.
That's interesting too, because it's like, okay, so it calls into question like if you're if if you're autistic or ADHD or both or anything, any of these things that we like, okay, our brains have been fundamentally different our whole lives. Do we experience boredom, or is it something else? Like, is it so different from what allistics are talking about that like that actually isn't what it is? And having like a recognizable name for our problems that allistics can reference is not the goal. And that's why I use kind of a decent amount of neologisms, because I'm pretty confident that if I could have related to that stuff, I would have figured it out since I started reading their stupid self-help books as like a middle schooler. So like I don't think they are describing our problem. And then I think probably people are circling the drain a little bit because they're trying to do reality testing and it's not landing totally. I think that's why they keep going, because we don't have the right model, so they're still having to push up against the holistic model of their disability, which is inappropriate. So I think that's what's happening there. Whereas like I'm trying to think how to get people out of that, because I can obviously do that myself. I think it's okay for the people without your disability to not know what the fuck you're talking about. And I think it's okay for them to be unable to help you. What would be good is if we could streamline that conversation and be like, hey, are we just talking to try to get you to relate to me? Because if that's the case, I'm going to go now because I have an actual problem that is different. And if I can pick the brains of a neurotypical person to understand how they're doing what they're doing, and maybe I can still not understand it because conceptually I don't have the cognitive framework for it, it just couldn't be there. I think that's a lot of the times the case. But if it's not a productive conversation of me trying to see what level of insight they have about how they're doing it in the first place, let alone how I'm supposed to do it. If it's more like you're not so different after all, or oh, neurotypical people could understand you if they tried hard enough. Well, what if they fucking can't? Should I be dependent on that? I don't think so. So I think it's hard, because then getting back to like the solution thing, and then us getting to share our solutions, like it's really difficult to put them into words, because we still police our own language to make it sound like a neurotypical person would understand it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, yeah, like something that I've been thinking about, I know that earlier on, like when you were talking about, trolls on Twitch, for example, and I was like, well, this group here doesn't have trolling, like maybe you could do more of this and less of that. But I'm also seeing the benefit to like the fact that you have your own content and your own model, and then we're all like talking about that.
Yeah.
Versus like my approach of starting with let's chat and see what comes up. I feel like there are all these words being used to refer to things, but I don't think it's the same thing as what that word usually means.
Yes.
But there's not time to like really dig in and get at that. So I feel like I need to start with like a seed before we can like build a plant versus being like a one-liner about the topic and then what do you all think?
Right. No, yeah, it's, it's at this level, and it's kind of crazy, because when work is done, I think it's just done. So, it's like having problems. Okay, well, I guess we'll talk on this. Anyways. Okay, is the echo gone? No.
Yep.
Now it is. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what you were talking about when we last could hear you.
Okay, what it was. I got it. So we have to do something for people that seems like a big investment, but I think once it's done, it's done. And then hopefully it's done on the level of like they then know how to do this themselves for other areas that we won't do it for in that one instance. And the process is you have to be like, when you heard people say bored, what do you think they meant? And then have them explain what they absorbed that term to mean and how they made sense of it. And my guess is maybe 8 times out of 10, they invented a completely novel definition for the word that nobody else is using in neurotypical society. Because that's what I did with valuable, meaning, important. Important to me says this thing will give me clues about the structure of the universe. If something is more important, it has more clues about the nature of all things and how they interact. That's not what people meant. They meant this thing and that thing are on a 3-dimensional field, and it's important to get one of them, quote unquote, done by arriving at it. And you should arrive on one based on how much other people in the 3-dimensional field will want you to. That's one version of important. Or based on how close it is to you somehow, which makes no sense to me. So all of that was nonsense. And it took me a long time to realize, like, meaning, importance, value. Like, I made up a new definition that, like, some physicist uses. That's good. It's workable, but it's not what most people mean. And I think that's happening with most stuff.
This just came up for me. That's why I think with what I'm doing when I'm writing, the actual tenets, not tenet, that sounds so stupid, but the actual like bits of information like that are in there they sound very simple, right? And very obvious. But if you ask people, what does that look like to you? what does that seem like? How does that manifest in your life? Everybody has a completely different like take and perspective about that. Like, and and if I tried to make it this very deep, complicated, like, let's talk about this super intricate topic, like we could, I guess, but then we wouldn't really be connecting with each other as much. Like, that's more just like, hey, I'm going to teach you or give you this really already
Yeah.
prepared thing. Whereas I think what is going to help us kind of, and this
What
is
do you
just
mean by
my,
connect, though? Is the question.
so like, that's a good point. So let's say I give you this very technical, like detail, very, very like thought out. I've thought out through everything, and here's my thought process.
Okay.
The only thing I'm getting from you is you going, okay, like that either makes sense to me or doesn't make, or explain it to me, please, right? Like, whereas if I'm like, I give you a very clear, and I'm not learning anything about you, right? We're only like experiencing the information together. Whereas if I give something very simple, like, you know, one of the things that I think is important that I do want to talk about at some point is like your parent should not have had a child they would grieve. A lot of us have been okay with the fact that our parents grieved our diagnosis or grieved something, and that to me is
Or
inappropriate,
resistance.
right?
Yeah.
So that's very simple, right? If you're going to grieve your child, don't have them. How does that affect you? What does that feel for you? What does that bring up for you? What does that give, how does that resonate with you? That to me then gives you a lot about me as a person. I learn a lot about myself as a person as I'm pondering it. And I also learn a lot about the people around me because of their reaction to it. So I'm connecting with the authenticity of that other person, and it's coming together to create this new relation, like that relationship is being built through that sharing of that. Whereas if I have thought out all of the ins and outs of it and I'm just kind of giving it, right, it's a transaction. Whereas if I have a very simple thing and we all interact with it, it's like a like a connecting experience. Does that make
Right.
that's what it means to me.
It absolutely makes sense. And I love these examples of language that you gave. I wrote some of them down. And yeah, I don't know if I missed this because I joined late. But I'm really curious what's the context of the work that you're doing around this.
What do you mean by context? I don't even mean that to be like our conversation. I just don't know what you mean.
So you'd said in the work that I do.
Oh, sure.
So what
Yes. So in the beginning of all of this, I'm gonna be starting a weekly peer support group for autistic people who have some kind of like marginalized identity. So
Ooh.
yeah, so women, BIPOC, LGBTQ, et cetera, et cetera. Like I couldn't. There's no exhaustive list, right? And I have a project that I've cut, not but like an underpinning of it, right? Like what are we trying to do with this? That I've been working on that's like 25 pages or so right now. And so yeah, so either like you can reach out to me on the Discord, I'm in there. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
the idea is that it's connecting a group of people and empowering a group of people, and we're kind of building a connected entity. And that's sort of the goal of what I'm doing, so I don't want to present my thoughts completely, right? And what I think anyone should, right? Because that's just not my, like, not the point.
I love that. Yeah, so I'm yeah, Indian American, and I find that like my childhood experiences, especially with learning, there's a lot of interplay there. And then after coming out as autistic, a lot of people assume that something is an autism thing. And if they just see me struggling and struggling, they assume that I can't do the thing. When actually there are also things I missed out on from being like at the intersection of two cultures and kind of missing a lot of the Venn diagram on both sides.
Yeah.
And like I don't know
And
what's what there.
yeah.
Oh, go
And
ahead, and then I
I've
gotta.
been a teacher. Sorry, it makes me think because you talked about education. Like I've been a teacher for 19 years. So
Mm.
I've seen how a lot of different cultures handle education and how they view education and how they handle disability and how they handle what they tend to do in those situations. And it's just
Mm.
very interesting. I will say what I noticed about I have not seen a lot of Indian females diagnosed, but I've seen a lot of Indian American boys, right? Um,
Mm.
and it is very much like, how do we get this? How do we fix this? How do we get this to stop? How is he going to grow out of this? He just needs to be more serious. He needs to be more focused. Like it's, and not obviously not across the
Yeah.
board, but just pattern wise, when you see it, like you see a pattern, right? Like, and it's just very interesting to me. It's super interesting. So like, I think that perspective is really needed because I think that's where I think that's also what helps us as a group kind of be able to advocate for each other when we're not together. Because that's another goal, right? Like that's why I could have just said like, oh, autistic women, and that's fine too. Like there's a place for that. But I have learned more from people who don't have my ID, who do not share my specific identity completely, than people who do. Because
I think
then
I'm
like my
starting to
perspective
understand your point
is
there, Lauren. Yeah.
yeah, like my perspective is challenged. And
Mm.
we are very black and white thinkers, right? It's either this is my experience and my experience. It becomes more concrete, I think, for us. And it takes like, no, my experience was actually this. My experience was actually this. My experience was actually this, right? And I think we have enough like
Yeah.
shared shame to come together and work on that and like kind of break down that internalized ableism. But I want there to be enough diversity that we're not stuck in some kind of like, you know, echo chamber, because I think that's dangerous too, you know? So yeah, so that's
Yeah.
what I'm starting to do. So I'm either people can reach out to me like here, I'm like on Discord, that's really cool. I just created the Discord I'm gonna use for the group. So I plan to get that started in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Thanks so
So
much
yeah.
for sharing all of
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I often feel kind of silenced in the
Mm-hmm.
neurodiversity space, or like they're looking for a token who's been through
Yeah.
less in a way and gonna have more of a funsy, cutesy perception, which like I used to talk about it more that way, but then I found myself just like used as a token more and more. So now I go in a lot
Mm-hmm.
more like trying to vet whether people are doing the work, and I get like pegged as difficult, and get a lot
Yes.
of thanks for sharing when I'm expecting a tell me more if they want to build
Yeah.
in this space,
And then could you clarify what you mean by a token autistic representation?
So, like people building, neurodiversity communities, and they want autistic people to be represented, even just one, but they don't want to like actually hear about what it's like, or an autistic woman or like autistic person of color, like oh, like they look at me and they're like, oh wow, like so many identities in one, perfect. Also, yeah, so many identities in one. I've seen where like so many ways the systems fail us, but then people are like, oh, okay, maybe I'll find another person who's instead talking the way Tara used to talk in 2021, back when she was willing to go with the flow and didn't realize the damage it could do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's something else I wanted to say. Yeah, Lauren Marie, which like no pressure to respond to this on stream. So I'm not gonna like address this to you directly. I'm just gonna like put it out there into the group if anyone has a response, or like if no one wants to respond. Like I'd also love to have a one-on-one conversation with you. But yeah, I'll say like more generally. Oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh no, sorry, I just said yes. Yes, I'm down for having. I'll send you a friend request. I'm down for having a one-on-one conversation for sure.
Wait, yeah. So yeah, the point that I'd just like to put into the group in general is that I agree that it's very needed to like hear about people's individual lived experiences, and yet I've been finding myself gravitating in a more intellectualizing kind of direction because I've seen like this is from my experiences, especially in groups or marginalized groups. And then when you have like multiple, like autistic people with a marginalized identity, I've been in groups where it was like all neurodivergent or mostly neurodivergent women, people of color, and where there would be a lot of trauma dumping, or a lot of go around the circle sharing all the pain that we're in, to the point where someone would share that they're depressed, and then someone, and like also in detail about the kind of thoughts they're having, which
I hear you.
someone else of the same cultural identity might be especially triggered by, and then now they're
Hmm.
depressed too. And I'm saying depressed, but
I
worse.
understand what
Um,
you mean. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I have because I do have a goal. There is a focus for this, right? Because I do think a lot of the support groups turn into here's why my life sucks. Everyone go around and tell me why your life sucks. And
yeah.
that's not super helpful either. Like that doesn't get you any. Like yes, it's good to have people that you can share those experiences with. However, it
Mhm.
doesn't then move you forward in any way. So,
Yeah.
um
Can
I
I
do
make a
have
point
a,
on this, Lauren? So
yeah.
I've been a part of a peer support group for, well, I haven't been at it regularly for the last month and a half, but I was in it for about a year and a bit. It was based for people who have autism and CPTSD, right? Especially the CPTSD part, you had a lot of people from lots of different backgrounds who've had a traumatic
I
upbringing
would
and
say that's
background.
most of us, honestly.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
also true with the counter section.
Yeah.
But I'll just say that I think what I found is where a group like that is successful, it's sort of a thing of the mediator has to keep it equal to where everybody can sort of, have a voice and yeah, share about any big issue that they're dealing with, but then that there's people there who are suggesting practical solutions, different sources, resources that they could potentially access.
Mhm.
And I think that's what's helped me in time. I think I've almost also moved sort of past from that group because I'm not at the level where I needed sort of like that level of support per se. But then people
Yeah.
who are in that space, they'll need it.
Yeah.
So yeah, if that helps.
Yeah. And I will
Yeah.
say this, I'm in a space that, you know, like I've done a good deal of like just very specific healing for myself. Um, I've done a lot of things that I really needed to do as far as my family and just boundaries, right? And so for me, the goal of this, right,
Yeah.
because I'm not handing anything on a silver platter, that's ridiculous, but is to support us through this way of making a solid list of our own boundaries, not the same list, but personal list that I need this boundary, I need that boundary's safe for me, that boundary's not safe for me. And I think in that you will hit on a lot of issues of self-esteem because it's that allows you to even assert the boundaries, right? So it's going to bring that up. But I think that what I have kind of worked on and written and created is a way of thinking about what should have happened, like what the actual thing is, and then how can we take those things and make them into practical boundaries for ourselves individually, and how can we assert them, and how can we support ourselves in asserting them. And I think we are, and the marginalized identity thing for me, I think too, as in a lot of cultures, and in a lot of ways. Like, people are socialized and they learn to ignore their own discomfort, and therefore like ignore their boundaries because their
Yes.
boundaries aren't valuable and they're not reasonable or they're not whatever, right? Like, we just weren't allowed to happen. And so I think
Or
it's
they're
unlearning.
selfish. Yeah.
Yeah, or you're selfish. Yeah. So I think it's unlearning a lot of that. And like, obviously I'm still I'm still doing it. I'm not like, totally done. Yeah, I'm not like a finished product, obviously, but I think that the skills that I've gotten from, teaching for so long, from running, trainings for adults, like I did a lot of that too as a teacher. Because I did special ed, so I did a lot of trainings around what is autism, what should you be looking at, what are the accommodations you can use, like how to teach adults, how to kind of maintain a group, run a group, like, keep everybody kind of
Wow.
like on the same page and kind of make some boundaries in the beginning, like some this is the way we're going to run this. This is how we roll. I think that I can support a group to get to a solid list of boundaries. And then over time, you have to, the support with asserting the support, maybe they change. They don't have to stay the same. Maybe they change, right? Like maybe this is one isn't important to you anymore, or you needed to add this, or this circumstance came up, or whatever. It's a fluid document. It's not a set in stone kind of thing, right? And so that's kind of my thought process around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thing to add. So this will be like a bit speculative, but it's also based on like what I really genuinely think is happening and will happen. I group that explicitly is saying, "Hey, female people, come here. We'll be cool here." And even if it's like majority female people, you'll still see this. We don't actually have like the consciousness raising to break. We acknowledged, included when we take care of other people. Somebody trauma dumps in a room full of women who are socialized only to we're good at, where our self-esteem comes from. So the threat to self-esteem, because we experience the same in many different contexts, and this can go into other marginalized experiences that are more specific that you may share with another person, right? You're like, oh, I experienced that threat. You are putting yourself in their shoes and you are seeing that threat. Then it's like, I feel confident about, oh, that's right, I regulate other people. So I think that's also the loop that they're getting stuck in. And females, we are socialized to do that on the behalf of males. If you have a group of just males, they don't do that. What they'll do, even if they're trying to like ape at being more sensitive and reconstruct their own conditioning, they'll be like, "You're the best. You're so hot. You're so great. You're so smart. You're amazing." Like they just shower each other with compliments and blow smoke up each other's buttholes, even when they're trying to emulate what they think is female socialization around caretaking because they want to break down toxic masculinity or something, right? They
I wouldn't
still
say
be
that's
doing it
necessarily true,
real
Jane.
different.
But you're
Say that
right. I
again?
would say the majority. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think men are capable of doing that because I've seen it. But you're right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get
The
people in a
majority of
group
them.
though,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Right.
you'll see this as the dominant theme. And so if you have female autistic people where we have low self-esteem, we've been ignored specifically when we are problem solving because it's a threat to the boys. We are often smart enough to compete with them directly and they will lose. Okay. And that's something we should be able to say. It's not blowing smoke up each other's buttholes. We are academically capable as a way of coping with our disability. And that's something that can be undermined. And instead, the identity that we're taught to associate ourselves with is I was told I was diplomatic and I can solve two random girls who I'm supposed to be friends with. I'm supposed to come in and play therapist and solve their disagreement. That's what I got attention for. And I didn't even get that shit from my family environment, right? And I still got that reinforced. So maybe I do it less, but I still know like this looks like a job for this bitch. Like
why
Mm-hmm.
is this my life? So that's also what's happening.
Yeah.
And there's the extra layer of like, oh, somebody cares that I was hurt. Yes, we all definitely care that you're hurt, but we've also been conditioned to then sidetrack everything to do this role of
Mhm.
caretaking that doesn't actually address the problems. It just keeps males from exploding into a rage. That's what our skill actually does. It's not real diplomacy. It's not real problem solving or community building or organization. It's just keeping who
Yeah.
doesn't have regulation skills from imploding. That's what we were trained to do. So, therefore, if that's what we're finding ourselves doing, we have to be like, wait a second, this isn't even a functional skill. This isn't what I'm good at. This is what I was conditioned to do and got paid for because males require this of females in our society still, and it's bullshit. When do we get to worry
Oh
about
my
how
god.
we're actually doing? What will we be doing if we didn't get interrupted to have to deal with somebody else's shit that is really just them not being able to self-regulate? So I think we should point out to women that actually we're quite good at self-regulating and that our efforts to self-regulate have sometimes been unacknowledged or framed poorly, that we still get treated like we're crazy even when we're regulating really well. So all of this is important to say that like that framing is playing out in these groups, and when you see that, it's like, no, but ladies and people who have internalized this behavior for other reasons, but mostly it's just going to be females because this is the problem with autism in our society. Ladies, you are good at other things. You don't have to do that right now.
Yeah, okay. I resonate so hard with all of that. Like I feel like a lot of my life was just playing that role. Also like being like the oldest in an Indian family and a sister like to a brother, like even more of that expectation. And
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I literally like after learning I don't want to be the therapist friend anymore, I'm like, what am I even good
What am I
at?
doing now?
And yeah, and then there's that dimension, and then there's also the like after being in more and more of these groups, it reinforce because like especially when a woman's leading a group, a lot of people come in and trauma dump. Um or
Yes.
like yeah, and then I would see them being out of their depth, and I would like pick up the pieces, and I would see domino effects where people are triggering each other into the danger zone. And I internalized that anything I say, like, if I say one wrong word, bad things can happen. And it led to like this, yeah, I think that really contributed to my burnout, and also to like I just freeze and I cannot make words or sentences a lot of the
Yeah.
times if I don't feel confident about what I'm saying. And I don't
Yes.
Yeah.
know if I like always struggled with this, but yeah, like
And I think
um
too, like, that's going to be something that I've thought, like, we really need to make sure is handled correctly, because it can't
mhm,
get on it can't snowball, right? Which is why I want to keep them really small.
mm,
And B, Jane and I've talked about this
mhm,
idea of like pods of people, right? Like, yes, maybe we have a big group, but then you have your little, like, almost like a
mm,
discussion section in a college class, if that makes any sense. Like, maybe people who
mhm,
are, I don't know, we have to ask the people in the group. Obviously, I wouldn't just decide this, but if it's,
mm,
I've been diagnosed for this long, how long, or I'm from this background, or I'm struggling with
mhm,
this certain thing, whatever. I don't know, whatever makes sense. It could be 1,000
mhm,
different things, right? But I think
mhm,
weirdly, what I'm good at is going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, so let's take a little bit, let's take a breath. Like, I'm very
mm.
good at like like diffusing conflict, if that makes sense. Through logic, actually.
That's
Through logic. Yeah,
awesome.
that's super clutch. I also want to highlight that, like, if people are kind of spinning off and talking about a traumatic thing that's making somebody get even more dysregulated, And then I think we have had experiences where we got dysregulated and nobody helped us as children. So we become adultified, and the girls are getting told like the old soul stuff, like oh, like literally I had a principal say I
Yes.
was to my mom, I was a 36-year-old woman trapped in a 10-year-old's body. No, I was a 10-year-old girl. Like I was a
I was
stressed out
always
10-year-old girl.
mature. I was always very
Yeah.
mature.
But you're having to basically, we do know how to regulate ourselves, but we're angry. I think we're rightfully angry that we didn't get help doing that. And the boys did. They didn't get good help doing it. They didn't get long lasting help.
They also got
It wasn't
shortchanged.
the help that, yeah, exactly. They were cut off from, they were stunted basically from developing, and then they're from their moms at a weird age that's too early, so they don't really know how to regulate themselves, and they're taking it out on everybody. And meanwhile, us, we didn't get the regulation real young, but we're supposed to be the spokesperson for everybody who's misunderstood. But what about us, right? So we're like, we can be very persuasive speakers and spokespeople, but then in the broader society, we're not listened to. So it's very frustrating to have all of that pent up potential, and you never got to see it through to the end. Whereas the boys, they're falling all over the place, fucking everything up, and they get to see their ideas through to the end, oblivious to all of the harm that they've caused because they're not self-regulating. We just have to self-regulate ourselves and other people until we forget what we wanted to do in the first place.
And I actually think that would be my biggest challenge in the whole thing is my go-to, like I do think I have, a good way of diffusing conflict and handling that. But I'm also been in a career where I've been essentially nurturing people, right? And I think that has made me be able to feel like I can handle the idea, but also that's my go-to. I feel much more. It's hard to let people nurture me, right? It's hard to engage fully, transparently and like as vulnerable as I probably should be, right? And things like that because I go, well, I'm in charge of everyone. Like, if things go badly, it's my fault. If things go well, it's definitely because they're amazing. So I never take on any of that positive. I
Because
only
they're
take on the
absorbed
negative.
into, I just want to add this one. They're absorbed into you, right?
Mhm.
And you are not, but you're still distinct from them. So basically, like people are acting like, I'm going to call it a wart. So like a wart is a virus, right? That burrows under your skin until it, or it's starting to cause you pain, and it's nurtured, if you will, by your blood supply. Like it programs your blood to go into it and give it nutrients, right? So you're providing the nourishment for this thing. It's providing you with pain, and it's taking, like, whatever you're doing is being filtered into it, but it's still separate from you, right? It never becomes part of you, even though it's using you. So like
But
that's
I
sort of
end
what
up
it is.
getting
We're like a
fulfillment
host
from the
to an
pain.
I was
infection.
about to say, it sounds
Yeah.
like a codependency system.
Yeah, like I still, I do love, I love it. Like there were the one time where like you and Rowan were gonna get into a little argument, and I was like, no, hello, this is what you meant, and this is what I think you meant, and that's not. We don't disagree on that, right? And you're like, oh yeah, okay. I love it. I think it makes me happy. Like I like doing it. I like doing it for the kids. I like doing it for the adults. I like explaining things enough, like logicking people through, like really getting people to see what I'm talking about, like through a logical end. And so that's why it's hard for me to leave teaching. I think it's very difficult. Like I should. We all think I should, but it's hard to extricate, like to think of my life without that nurturing or support aspect. Like I think that And you could call it passion. I mean, you could look at it different ways, right? I think there's a healthy way to do it, but I think it's difficult for me to even think about like not
Hmm.
doing that. It's weird.
Hmm. So, yeah, a question that I have is, Lauren, when you were talking about being nurtured yourself, is that something you're hoping for in your group or like in life in general?
I think both. I think that I want to be able to let my community support me. I want to let my community help me. I want to, let my community nourish me in that way. And I think that just
Mhm.
in life, like I want to be able to let people just help me because they want to and not because they're getting something from me, not because and not as a
Mhm.
transaction, right? Like support and love and help and all of that as just I want to do this because I know I do that, right? Like I don't go into the,
Mhm.
James was like, help me.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And it wouldn't be because I thought, you know, she was going to do
Mhm.
something later. It would be because I love her and I want to help her. That's it, right? I don't want to be able to accept that motivation from other people. And I feel guilty about it
I
right now. And I
I
don't
hear
want.
that and mm,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear all that. Um and so something that I'll say is like, so I have seen communities where the leader is able to receive support
Mm-hmm.
once it's at a place where there are other folks taking on leadership roles who have been vetted by seeing how they contribute to the community, like, starting with showing up a lot, and yeah, like helping others in the community alongside the leader and
Yeah.
like not,
I don't even really
causing.
love the idea of leader. I don't even like the word leader very much. That like weirds me out a little bit. I mean, I get it, but it like makes my chest hurt a little bit. But I think
Hmm.
the reason I'm doing it now and not waiting is that I want a community that can like create this thing with me. That I'm not just giving to, but we're all kind of going, I don't know, does this part work? Like, does this part work? How did everybody feel about that? What do we want for us? How do we want to grow this? What do what can everybody contribute to it? Like, and have it be a very grassroots kind of thing, as opposed to, I have this polished, finished product and here it is for you, everyone. I do want people that are gonna be there to really like want to help,
um
right, in that way, like decide what this thing is going to be, like help create it in a way. So
yeah, um I
because I'm
hear
ridiculous.
all.
I'm ridiculous. Like I nobody should follow me. I'm ridiculous. Like, I'm nobody, right? I don't think, like, that's not, no, like anybody who says I have all the answers is full of shit, right? Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
But
I agree with.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
This is really
I
interesting to me.
agree.
These are really fascinating questions.
Yeah, I
Or we can
agree
talk about it
that.
one-on-one later if you want. You don't have to like go into whatever now, but it's fascinating to me.
It seems like, okay, me and Ro are kind of going off on this. It seems like there's a socialization for women to have very complex emotions on the behalf of everyone else who
Hmm.
hasn't developed because they're stunted by this system. So also just even like feeling guilty for somebody providing you with something that you need to progress forward. Like, why should you have? But I think that comes from potentially understanding how complex the guilt should have been for people who did that to you. There's people who should have felt really guilty
Mhm.
for putting that on a little girl.
Yeah, that's true
Yeah.
too.
So, yeah, Lauren, we can definitely discuss this one on one. And yeah, like what kinds of things, like what forms of, I did an accelerator for community builders recently, which I can
Mhm.
drop in the chat. And
Be
one
awesome.
of the key things that they brought up, it's called building with, rather than building for. And I can see that you like feel that deeply. And I've seen communities like I've seen it done, you know, in ways that worked and also in ways that led the whole thing to fall apart. So you know, it does like something that I'm trying to hone in on myself is what kind of things, like where do I have taste about, like what Ro was saying about highlighting, you know, what's helpful, what's like, okay, solutions, but also not all solutions are created equal and some of them may be harmful. So, you know, like what aspects do I feel that I'm like equipped to kind of curate what
Mhm.
offerings are helpful versus like, you know, I've had people who wanted to help me with building who hurt me, and I really hope they're like not hurting others, and I don't want to like give them opportunity to, and it can be get to the point where that takes up so much energy that like it takes away from being able to build. Um so like I don't know if there have been many examples of groups where the founder was able to get support as well, like from day one. Like from what I've seen is it usually is an effort that starts with the founder like giving a lot more than they get,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or
That
you,
is. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm expecting
Um
that. That's what I'm expecting. To be honest, I mean, and plus, why would people trust me yet? I haven't done anything, right? Like,
mhm.
no, like, I haven't
Yeah.
done anything. I haven't done anything to deserve anybody's like trust or support. Or I mean, I guess you could. I mean, maybe, but like in certain situations, but like I haven't done anything yet. What are you? What are you behind? Don't be behind something you don't understand yet. So I wouldn't want people. No, I get it. That'd be weird.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And yet, like, I've seen so many people try to do that, and I've been
Yeah.
hurt in the process so much that I was feeling a little bit like my anxiety rising in this conversation, and like, okay, like I
Yeah.
need to bring up this point to like see where people
Yeah.
stand on it to know.
And there are
Yeah.
questions I haven't thought about, and so it's really good.
Mm,
Like this is why I want like this kind of discussion. Like yeah, man, bring it up. Like there's things that will make it better,
mm,
or like question things that I haven't thought about that people or you know what I mean? Like I want to have those conversations because then it clarifies for me. Well, where do I stand on that? And those are important things for me to think about. So like
yeah.
I'm autistic. I don't take this shit personally. You know what I mean? I'm not like defensive in that way because I think it is a lot like setting up a classroom and like the kids don't know you. Why would they trust you and do what you say? You haven't shown them any reason other than just being bigger than them, and that's not a good enough reason.
Right.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
I think this
I
is sort of like connecting to something that
Yes.
is important. Or sorry, do you want to go ahead there? I think my apologies.
No, I just popped that up on the screen.
Oh,
Please go.
sorry, Jay.
Yes.
Yeah, I was sort of just thinking that so what's important for this group and sort of similar to what you're describing in a classroom, right? Is maybe what doesn't work is doing like I get that there's children and there's adults, but it can like because the idea is that I think what I've noticed with caretaking, right, being a parent in some ways, there's this sort of like there's going to be a level to which a child is dependent on somebody who's got more skills and experience, right? In this case, a parent or an adult. And then as a teacher, right, you sort of have to be very careful about where you draw the line because you're trying to spur these kids to sort of like be able to support and help themselves as they're growing, right? And I think you
Yeah.
can apply this to anybody at any age. So I think that should be like always the rule number one. But yeah, I'm just curious if that kind of helps in terms of it being like a disclaimer or like the very foundation or structure that like a peer support group should be set in. It should be, what is the minimum level that people can be expected to help themselves, or for this individual person in their respective context, right? And then you work from
Yeah.
there so that you don't get roped into basically making somebody be over dependent on your assistance.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's really what I noticed too with a lot of my kids is that I teach kids that have intellectual disabilities as well. So I have 4 kids in my class and they're all autistic and they have intellectual disabilities. And the biggest thing that I work on with them is thinking that they can. Like it's not kind for me to treat you like you can't. That's not kind. It's not nice.
Yes.
And so I think coming from a place of like assuming competence is super important. Like I'm not, I'm not thinking like, oh, what can I give to all these people? Like, sure, I have a framework that I want to start from, but I think what everybody contributes to it is way more valuable. Like I could be really like, no, we're doing it, but then I'd be what? I'd be alone by myself with my principles. Great. That sounds great. That sounds terrible. So I think like, and I've had to be so adaptable about, I've had 30 kids in a room, 30, and I've been trying to teach them all the same thing, and they're all so different. And like, what works for this one doesn't work for that, and just the equity of like, maybe as a group, maybe there's one day that I need more, right? That's okay. There's going to be a day when you need more, and we're going to be there for you, and that's okay. That can be flexible. It's not rigid. I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm still, I'm autistic, so I'm still got my rigidity and I like my routines and I like I like that. But I think the adaptability is the biggest piece where I would like to see
Right.
us like not need to understand. Like you don't need to understand.
You
It's
don't. I think, and especially for kids, right? Because they might not understand, you not understanding. And I think my mom's a teacher, my grandma's a teacher. Like I come from a family, right, where there were a lot of educators. And I think when it comes down to it, it's all about like what model do you present, right?
Yeah.
In the beginning and all that, isn't it?
Yeah. You don't need to understand. Like that person's experience is their experience. Like I don't need to understand your experience as an American because I'm never gonna, right? But I can still empathize and validate and say that your experience matters and that I believe you and that I support you and that what you tell me you need is what you need. Like without going, well, I don't understand why you would need that. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Right? Like I'm here to help you. Like I don't need to. Thing is this need to understand, and I get that. Like I have that need too, but I think what helped me the most is giving that up and giving up
Also,
to understand.
I'm here to help you. It's not like it's not a forever thing that you're there. Like, so when somebody help, being the kind of person that's capable of being her is context, right? You're not like always a helper. And I wanted to just point out like the triangulation. Like I haven't heard it phrased. This is triangulation with like slightly different wording than what I was exposed to, but I really like some of this list that Rose shared. So one of the like stepping into saying like, because I'm here doesn't mean you need help.
Yeah.
I exist as somebody with lots of different things that I'm trying to get done, and we have to help each other to get anything done. And the reason why we're seeing this dynamic, and it has to be addressed, autism, is because autism was coded by sex, and we have a sexist society. And the problem, why do women end up stuck between this like rescuer victim thing? Very rarely the bully, because we can't, in an embodied sense, resort to violence. So you
Right.
have more
We have
men
that.
resorting to that role because they physically can threaten people in a way that women just can't, because if anyone really wants to know, it has to do with how our pregnancy works and this is how the species even exists. It's not this whole like hunter-gatherer nonsense. I think that's complete bullshit. but neither here nor there. But it's an abusive dynamic
Being
that
proven to be
bottoms
bullshit.
out.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. It's an abusive dynamic that bottoms out at I can make my body fall on your body and break it.
And that's just
So yeah,
a reality. And I think like
and it.
I don't even,
Oh,
no, go ahead.
Oh, I want to add one thing, and then like being someone who helps that person, right? That has to make that person a better person, centers the person that is the most fucked up, like is the person that is the least able to regulate themselves or anybody else, and is the least able to communicate about problems in the first place. So why should we reform the person who can't do those skills that we would need in order to address the actual problem? So it doesn't it further reinforces patriarchy by saying are so unimportant that we have to spend anybody who's really, really brilliant, all of her energy trying to reform this awful bully who's interrupting everybody trying to get on with this, right? So that's going to be incredibly important. And then to also say you don't have to do that ever again, and that wasn't helping you, that was making you accountable for somebody's aggression.
I hate how much I see like in the restorative justice, well, like a lot of understandings of it at least. Yeah, people focusing on rehabilitating the perpetrator rather than the victim, and just apparently just telling the victim they're not kicked out is enough.
It's not victim focused. And it should be, but it's not. When like a lot of people practice it in a way where it is not victim focused at all. It is
They don't know
focused
how to do
on
it.
making right.
They focus on
this
anything like
perpetrator
why were you such a why, if anything, they're like, why were you the victim? Not what were you doing before you were a victim? What were you trying to do before that shit happened? Let's make sure you get to continue to do that, even though this just happened to you and we can't make that go away. We're sorry. We don't know what this is going to do. You can't just say, oh, let's put a silver lining on it. Maybe the abuser really made me better in the end. Nope. What were you trying to do? Sorry this happened. Let's get back to what you're trying to do. The victim completely loses their identity, and which was what they actually had an autonomous vision of completing.
And I will say I have 3 like very specific tenets of this whole thing, which is self-advocacy, authentic self-expression, and autonomy. And having having the autonomy to like make your own decisions, to decide what you have the energy for, what you don't have the energy for, not feeling like you have to put your energy into things that don't serve you. Like to break away from this idea that like we are there to modify our behavior to help the people around us feel comfortable. That's not what I'm trying. Like that is not it. That's not the situation. It's being able to empower yourself, right, to have that autonomous life and to go about your life in a way that you are a whole person. You are a whole. There's nothing wrong or fucked up. Essentially, right? It's like you have the ability to make the decisions about what you do and do not want to do, regardless of if you want to factor other people into that, that's your choice. That it's your choice to factor those people in and not something you're doing because you feel like you have to. Or there's there you may be times where it's a threat that you really do have, like there's a safety issue and you need to, right? But in the ways that we can separate ourselves from that. And if we want to factor other people into it, it's because we made a conscious choice. Like if I had an idea and it would hurt my friends, I'm going to say, you know what? I care enough about my friends. I care more about my friends than this thing I want to do, or this thing I want to say, or this opinion I want to share. Right. And so I'm factoring those people into my behavior. But that's a choice I'm making. And to have it be like, give us back the freedom of choice and to make those choices wholly and authentically and based on what we truly believe in and not what we've been taught. That's really the idea.
Right.
So,
yep.
You know.
I
I
don't
feel
think
like I'd
people are wrong
dominate all of that, but you know, I
no,
don't mean to.
this is really good. I think that I don't think people are wrong in sort of situating autistics at some sort of focal point of people doing like restorative justice or social justice of some kind. They're not wrong in doing that, but their motivations are completely conditioned around something they don't want to let go of yet, which is the idea that this male female thing is a really, 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 really big deal. It's not like a small deal. It's not like a, oh, that's unfortunate. Like our species might die because of this. Like that's how serious this is. And we don't take it seriously because we don't take females seriously because females are just kind of like a bystander that helps out males, right? So what could possibly be a problem if the female people have had all of these weird things happening to them that ultimately they have to like clean up and make it seem like the house is nice, right? Like, oh, the house is working great. Houses are working fine. Look at how happy the housewives are. Never mind that we had to put them on Valium for like 40 years. You know, like, no, it's fine now. But no, it's fine now. Ladies, isn't it fine now? It's fine now, right? It's fine. It's a big narcissistic family unit that we're all trapped in. And it's okay to say, actually, I really wanted to do something else with my life. This was stupid. This was stupid. Like the things that all of us have gotten to do with our lives, given that supposedly our species values people that are creative and intellectually competent. Are you kidding me? That's what we're doing. Look who's running for president. This is stupid. So I think part of what autistics get to say is that humanity, you're full of shit, man. You keep saying that you're going to get your act together, but you're not. And we don't have time for you to play along with this because we just can't. Our disability is too profound and we talk too good. We make sense. So you can't fight us on this. At a certain point, we're just going to have it mapped out too well and be able to tell people. And I think AI also could potentially do something like this in the future. And that's why I kind of like it, but potentially tell people, look, we looked at your information. We looked at what you're doing. This is a probabilistic guess, but the probabilities of you guys being right are like nothing. So can you just stop? Can you just stop with your bullshit and start working on something that doesn't put people into a meat grinder and ruin their potential and deprive them of being the person that they could have been autonomously deciding to do interesting things that would benefit not only them, but everyone, and become more efficient at that? I would like to be efficient at the things that society reluctantly acknowledges that I'm good at.
So personally, this is just like my where I'm seeing like the path of least resistance. And I'm not telling anyone to, you know, stop trying to break down other walls instead. Like if someone manages to, you know, get in some other way, like that's amazing. Personally, like one blocker that's especially like getting to me right now is, so if we're trying to, you know, tell the people running the systems that like, you know, that their stuff is bullshit, well, they're in a position where they don't really need to care and they have a lot to gain by not caring. But what like really makes me feel the worst is you know, like if we saw, for example, Great Recession in like 2021, lots of people were noping out and trying to build their own stuff. But then now we see like a lot of people, basically the marketing of things has gotten to the point where a lot of things look like deeper models than they are. And it's harder to tell like what actually has truth to it and how much thought has been put into things. And like with communities, we're talking about all, you know, the examples of ones where it's claiming to do good, but maybe not, or like it's badly run because there aren't many examples of how to do this kind of thing well, just as one example. And so like I would like to find the people who want to develop better models and like want to have conversations like this and like share things with them and kind of go bottom up that way. Because I actually see like, for example, employee resource groups at companies when like my thinking would always be like, okay, there are a lot of people running into similar challenges. Let's like get together and see how we can help each other out. Versus like they would be like, okay, here's how we're gonna sneak into the room where the big bosses are hanging out and like
Yeah.
try to convince them to listen to us. And I feel like that's, yeah, teaching us how to regulate these people who've had like no knowledge about how to regulate rather than like
Yes.
how to develop skills. And that's why like the moment conversations go in that direction of like, how do we convince the people running this shit to change and lingers there, I'm like, all right, this is probably not the most useful place for me to be right now. And also like I've had, yeah, people coming into my group and saying like, instead of spending your energy helping each other out, you should go help these people who are being really ableist in their neurodiversity
Yeah.
efforts not be ableist. And I'm like, how long is that going to take? I'd rather build something that like does so well that their thing they're doing like doesn't matter, which maybe we're like saying the same thing and just like using different language. But yeah, that's just like,
No, I like that because then it's like people are basically interrupting you to say, but we anointed those people as important. So since you're demonstrating skills that an important leader would have, can you just like give them to those guys because we already gave them the hat? They have the hat and the badge. So can you just like let them pretend to be you for a minute and take credit for everything? Can you fix these deeply broken people that are the only people attracted to this system in the first place? Like, no, of course we can't. Like, why would we want to do that? It's trying to like redeem what this structure already puts as important people instead of saying we all don't know what an important person is because of this structure. It's just not that. Like as it bottoms out, like Trump and Vance and all those people, they get worse and worse every year. I hate to see the next model, to be honest, because I thought it couldn't go any lower. It probably can, right? But like
Well, have you not seen
then there's supposed to be a bigger and bigger project.
have you not seen the proposed paper for Project 2025?
Oh, of course. Yeah. No,
Oh
I know. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, right. There is no bottom. So the limit doesn't exist. Yeah, but that's the thing too, is being around those people. First of all, they're just not healthy people. They're doomed. They're a lost cause. I don't care how much power they currently have. I really don't. And I don't think we're going to come up with a solution having to interrupt ourselves and get bullied by them by proxy at this point. Like like Elon Musk doesn't know who the hell I am. Why the hell do I have to think about that idiot?
right? Okay, this is another thing. So I've found that like I spent so much time and energy trying to understand the powers that be that I was like delayed in learning how to have healthy friendships. And like I'm still trying to imagine what a healthy romantic relationship would look like for someone with my personality. Which is why like I really resonate with what you said, Lauren, about like talking about what things should have looked like. Because when I'm just like, okay, I recognize that a lot of stuff in my life has been toxic, but yeah, Shadow, I see you. Yeah, I'm 29 and I'm like barely figuring it out. But yeah, like when people are like they talk about, all right, this is toxic, this is toxic, this is toxic, don't do that. But then what do we do instead? And that's like a very personal thing. And it's like really helpful to have people we can talk through it with. And something that really rubs me the wrong way, which like I do see that there is some truth to the idea that some things do need to come from inside us. Like for example, what you were saying about knowing what boundaries we need. Like someone else can't tell that to us for us. But I do think there's like some solutioning, like when I'm like, okay, I know this isn't working for me, but I don't know what kind of boundary could work. Like, can we brainstorm? Like people tell me, no, you just need to go meditate. And I'm like sometimes I just start crying, like, because I know shit's
Well,
not working.
they're sort of like basically telling you you know, don't go for anything that you might desire, don't do reality testing, just simply become disattached to anything, right? To not cause us any disturbance.
They're trying to make you give up. If I'm being honest, what I think they're actually doing, I think it's conditioned. I don't think it's malice, but they're kind of like, but we didn't give you the hat. You see, we gave that guy the hat. So whatever the answer is, it's probably not that important anyway. So stop asking us, because I have to think about the guy with the hat and the badge that we gave the hat and the badge to, and all the dumb shit he says. So let me just meditate on that forever, even though it doesn't make any sense. So they're like, they're basically constantly
They'll say things like
trying to
know your place, basically. Yeah.
basically that's what they're trying to get you out of the way, because like they're too busy obfuscating for the narcissist in power, like, and making sure that the crazy like tautologies are not explained away by pure logic is stupid. Like they have to be like, no, but this is profound. And then when you're like, I think something actually profound is going on with me and I need help with it, they're basically saying, but you can't have that happen because you're not the person that's in charge and special. You're not special. Go somewhere else. And like, you know, it's so you should cry. That's gross. Like it matters that you figure this out. It matters that you get help.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's really what I want, is everyone to be able to like be in that coach role with each other eventually. Like, I'm not here to rescue you. I'm not here to save you. I'm not just a vessel for you to dump your trauma in, but I am here to make you feel powerful and make you feel like you have a way out of it. Like, not out of it, but like, because it's not like it's a sense of helplessness, and to coach people out of that sense of helplessness, and
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing. And I think, like, you know, yeah, I don't know what this boundary should be, like, you know, well, I know mine's this, and like, hey, do you care about this? All right, we'll include that. Do you care about this? No. Okay.
I think sometimes we have to say, like, are you actually helpless? Like, is it set up so that, like, if you try to do that, no one's gonna help you? And because
Yeah,
they
like
can't,
maybe that's not it.
even if they wanted
Maybe
to?
that's, you know, and also maybe like this avenue might be better because you have more
Right.
autonomy in this lane. You have more
Or yeah,
power in this lane. Like
right.
there's
Right.
two here
It can
instead of
be
banging
there
your
can
head
be
against the
reasons.
wall.
Yeah, and there can be reasons to pick, I think, the thing that you're going to be effectively helpless at, but just know that that's the deal, probably. Like maybe you'll get surprised and somebody will help you. I wish I got more advice like that, and more, I guess, not advice. It's just like a recognition. So I'm not like, oh, don't feel helpless. I'm like, oh, okay, but like I think nobody's able to help me with this disability, and they're disinclined to figure it out for all these complex social reasons. And even if they wanted to, they're going to get lost because we haven't figured it out enough for them to even talk about it. So like maybe literally I just am helpless sometimes, and can I do it anyway?
Maybe just being supported for what you theoretically have been able to do in the past and what you can do.
Yeah, or somebody just saying like, well, fuck it. Well, since we don't know what the limits are, let's just you go. If you get bashed around, we can talk about it and then we can see why people are stuck. Like at the very least, even if we have to hit our head against the wall, or let's try not to hit literally our head. Even if there's a wall and we're going to try to hit it with something, we should have a realistic expectation that that's the level of problem that we're actually addressing. And so I don't know. It's like it's kind of interesting to me because it's like I think that's where I'm at right now, where there's a couple things where I'm like, actually, I don't think I can get help with this. Not because it's too hard or I'm too needy. It's just this whole thing is too stupid. And I have a disability that conflicts with the stupidity pretty precisely. So I am just pointing out the hole in the system.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. Like one thing that I really have beef with in the entrepreneurship and like the startup world especially is, so I've heard the word factory farming of startups. And so I see venture capitalists treating people this way, but I also see like a lot of mentors kind of treating people this way, where everyone, or not everyone, but some people get a dopamine hit when someone takes one tiny piece of advice that that person gives, and then they go succeed thanks to that plus 99 other things. And there are very few people who are willing to stick around when someone tries to navigate ambiguity and then gets hurt. There's a lot more talk nowadays of like, think about, what you can afford to take on by yourself, because we're in a
You know why that
world
is,
where
though?
people don't help each other.
Yeah, well, it's the great man myth. So the reason why they're doing that is all the people at the top are pretending that they had smooth sailing, unless when it's convenient for them to give a heroic retelling of all their trials and tribulations. So basically, they're saying if it's hard, maybe you're not a special person. And that's why you don't have the hat that we already stuck on a guy without asking if we should have stuck the damn hat on the guy. So like the hat is now my euphemism for power, and I'm just going to probably keep it forever because I see like one of those little, like those newspaper hats. That's what's in my head. Anyways, we put the hat on the guy and you don't have the hat. So therefore, anytime that you have a difficulty or you're assessing correctly that this is not looking so hot and you're going to have to maybe fail, people are like, well, but what if that's evidence that the guy really should have power and you're really a dum-dum after all? You're just a crazy weirdo. And it's like, well, how about not? That's just statistically not, I don't think that's possible. I don't either I was good at stats or y'all don't know what stats are, I guess. Like, so which one is it? So I probably am actually good at kind of guessing what world we're living in. And I think that's the problem. There's a great man myth, and they didn't get to where they were through going through the process, but they're telling us all how to get through the process, which is slowing everybody down because that's not the damn process.
Also, what a lot of people are
Yes.
ultimately doing is trying to make a profit by selling easy solutions to people who'd be vulnerable enough to believe them.
Right. Absolutely.
Really resonate with the point about slowing us down by claiming they know the process. I'm like, yeah, that is wasting people's precious time and energy, just being stuck in like there's so much information on the internet now about how to do a bunch of things, yet people are getting stuck, I feel like, more than 10 years ago.
Yes.
I just had an idea. Do you guys ever have this where it's like, let's say you try to do something, like if it's something that you haven't done before, and then maybe because you're not sure how to do it, you might like imagine that it's like super difficult, you might grow doubts, and other people might say that it's difficult, right? And when you do end up doing it, you basically find that it didn't take as much energy as you thought it did. But then it ends up sort of like making you exhausted anyway because of all of that, like sort of like anxiety and doubt. Doesn't have anywhere to go.
Right.
Oh.
Well, it's supposed to look a certain way, and this was like getting back to my metaphor way earlier on. Like it's like the coloring pages that we're supposed to do. It's supposed to go a certain way. It's supposed to look a certain way. But what if nobody's ever turned in a coloring page and everyone's lying?
Yes.
What if it's all bullshit?
Yes.
Maybe it is. Because socially people can do that. That's the problem with the society that we're currently in, that kind of decouples is doing as arriving, doing as building, and why we're so weirdly situated in this problem. Like we're the wedge stuck between these two things that are about to collide. Like if somebody says, oh, doing as arriving is all there is in reality, they make a really thick, complex, convoluted social reality play. And maybe all of it is just props and there's never been anybody that's done it.
Yes, and that creates a system of codependence where you have to find some person with a hat to pity you, essentially, and protect you and blame someone else instead.
Right. Right. Yeah, we're basically in the role of possible scapegoat, and I don't think this is ending very well because we're getting less and less useful for any of this stuff, because the reason the system is collapsing isn't conspiratorial. It's that reality keeps being reality, and we keep making more humans on the planet running through this thing with more advanced technology, and the shit is falling apart because it doesn't make sense in reality. So that's why we're having more problems. We're having more variables, and the calculation isn't calculating and never has. So whenever you're kind of like being put as a scapegoat of like, oh, see, they didn't try hard enough at our system, that's complete and utter nonsense. I'm like, first of all, I don't think you can sell that to people anymore, because too many people are getting pissed off and are saying like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. This is stupid. Like this was a dumb thing that you made me have to do with my life. And secondly, you know, the idea of being a sycophant or being their lackey is also not attractive, because they did that with the males. They did that with the male autistics. My grandfather worked on the atom bomb, right? So
Oh,
they don't
man.
want the females for that, because this whole thing is being run by a bunch of bullies who at the end of the day are going to be bullies who try to physically harm people. That's the threat. So the whole thing is collapsing in real time. And I don't know what to do about that. I just know that that's the situation, like on a species wide level. I don't know how this breaks down in cultures that aren't English speaking, that don't have like a really dominant Western media bias. But at this point, Western media is like basically everywhere.
I can tell you that they've
can
slowly
do
become more authoritarian, is what's happening.
yeah, that's okay. That's not, yeah, like Hungary, I think, is one that's getting crazy. Yes. Because they're losing. They're not losing a fight with women or marginalized people or people of color. They're losing a fight with reality. And they're losing control of the population, who's supposed to pretend the emperor has on great new clothes, what a cool hat, you totally deserve it.
Yeah. So something that I'm trying to do, like, when I'm seeing these systems collapse, is like thinking about what are the lost arts, and like might be able to help us get out of here, and how can we cultivate them. And like I really like your points, Jane, about like the skill of, yeah, like learning skill development and your ballet example. And then I was like developing this theory about how another skill that's being lost is like collaboration. And I've heard this, you know, whether it's people who studied music in college but never learned how to jam, or like in tech, nowadays everything's a marketing game where people are trying to push that their skill set is the missing piece that people need to pay more attention to, but they're not able to tell people how to integrate it with the larger system, because no one, or like most people, don't understand functional larger systems. And like the systems that used to exist for kind of making that work have been written off and come out of favor, because these people, who a lot of them are marketing gurus but claiming they're an expert on like product management or design or something else, and so they'll become like the guru of that field, but like have, you know, some thesis, which when you really try to dissect it and like put it together with the other things, it just falls apart. So it's kind of like these ideas warring together, and the glue that they used to come up against, they're like, oh, that's, you know, yeah, there are problems. It doesn't work right. So just get rid of that piece and just do this instead. But we're stuck with like all these little, like, okay, if it's like a Lego thing you're building, it's like we have all the individual Legos, but we don't have the baseboards. Like people are like coming after those and being like, they're bureaucratic, we don't need them. But then you don't know how to build anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's come to a point where people they're focusing on just selling the Lego pieces. I think everybody, I think the vast majority of the population is sensing the breakdown of the systems, right? Slowly but surely. And I think what most people are concerned, as far as I'm aware, is making money, materially ensuring their security to the expense of potentially anything else. That's been my experience from what I've seen.
We don't understand that that leadership is not an abusive bully. We don't understand that fundamentally. So what's happening, when people are like, let's burn down all the structures, I don't think they've unpacked that. And what they're saying is, I think we should get rid of leaders now that people that formerly would have been beaten to death so that they can't try out being a leader, quote unquote. So therefore, all forms of leadership are bullying. That's not true. That doesn't make sense. And so you need to get people to separate the concept of a leader or a manager or whatever you want to say, but somebody who is an authority and authoritarianism, because they don't. And so, and it's also like, conveniently, I'm just going to say it because it's worth saying, we're just holding on for dear life to this ideology. Once women are at any point where we might actually get to be leaders, because this is explicitly banned in religious texts for us to be authorities who teach and lead and speak and are the center of a group of people coordinating themselves, okay? And that role will be more fluid in the future. I agree with that. But you'll get people where they're suddenly like, anarchism. I'm like, convenient that now you're into anarchism. Like, maybe you're just trying to like keep the power structure as is, but you're just going to take it underground because you just don't want women leadership. And I think that comes down to like a lot of the issues that we're having, and you're going to run into it head first, I think. And it's going to be not stated as plainly as this. And it's like, I appreciate people like humoring me that maybe this is actually fundamental to what's going wrong. But I think autistic people, when we have to go into a position of authority or power, or and the power isn't abusive, we can get bullied really quickly. But what you need to then do is say, we do not tolerate bullies, period, the end. You can't do ballet and get bullied, for example. That's something that I learned. You can't do a physical skill and be interrupted from doing the physical skill. We can't do anything and then have somebody come in and continuously interrupt us. And then the focal point goes back to trying to reform that person or trying to switch to their dumb ideas again. I'm tired of dumb ideas. There are plenty of people with great ideas that need to cultivate them, but they will look like leaders. But they'll look like real leaders, not bullies.
Yeah.
I've also heard a point about real leadership being quote unquote boring, supposedly, for a
Right.
lot of people.
Yeah. It's not exciting. It's boring. Yeah, 100%.
And that's how the
agree with
bad leaders tend to underhandedly take over, because they promise, a lot of showmanship and a lot of bravado, right? And people eat that up real easy.
Right. Well, there's maybe the way to think about it this way, like even with my doing as arriving, doing as building, if I separate leadership that way, which I find just generally this has been useful as a tool because it seems to be a fundamental problem as well. So if I say there's a leader who's a role model of skills, that's kind of like the Mr. Rogers things where he says attitudes are caught, not taught, where you just put the skilled person in front of people and people just mimic. So there's the person that you mimic because they're so skilled and it's so attractive to know what the fuck you're doing. That's more what I mean, is that. And that produces more leaders because people will like spontaneously copy the abilities and try to refine them themselves, which is why the internet is interesting, because you do see some explosion of skills even as things are collapsing around us, which is very surreal. But then the other type of leader is this like esoteric claim to higher and higher levels of knowledge or insight over the entire world. Like you're going to a higher and higher vantage point to then observe the terrain, but that's just nonsense. That's way, like, even if humans could do that, which we can't, that type of leader would still be just basically a calculator, not a role model. Like that's not what human brains do. So it's really just a claim to being a little godlet or something.
Yeah.
So just as an aside, I am starving. So
Oh, it's 6:30 too.
yeah, it's 6:30 here. So I am gonna go eat. But yeah, I'm
Thank you for
super
the time,
excited.
everyone. I appreciate all the different thoughts.
Yeah. Really good chat.
Yeah. So, and hopefully, like,
Leadership.
there will be an update at some point. That would be great too, I think.
See, and then I'll pop off this, but just for reference. So, government is in here. So to govern something, to manage something, that makes sense to me. Influence, that makes sense to me. Even supervise, but then to pop into like similar, the state or position of being a leader gets into domination, control, ascendancy. That's what I was saying. We have
My
moving
favorite one is
through a
Dominion.
yeah, it's moving through a three-dimensional space that's been turned sideways, so it goes up to the heavens. It's a neurological magic trick that we played on ourselves, and we have maybe doomed the species because of it. But yeah, it's the ascendancy thing. That's the problem. So leadership is not ascendancy. Leadership, we can argue, is mastery, real, genuine mastery of a skill, management of the things related to the skill, and then having some sort of influence over how the skill then is, maintained in other people's lives as well. It's like it's skill focused behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Boop, 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 boop. That's it. Okay. Thanks for talking to me. I hope these abstract ideas turn into concrete things, and I will work on that also. Hopefully over time I'm more concrete, but I think this is true. I think this is like, I think we shouldn't ignore it. And then I trust in all of you, and I have confidence in all of your brains for this to actually go some direction in your modeling, that it contributes in a bigger and more special way, because this to me is deeply meaningful in the way that I established.
Oh. Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate you like picking these things apart, and I'm thinking about how to create concrete things as well, which I've had like false starts going off of not deep enough of a model, I feel like. I'm trying to figure out how to balance like, okay, like how do we actually fill in the missing pieces?
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, I'm going to review this VOD so I can work on my communication abilities and make sure that I heard everybody's ideas as fully as I can. Thank you for contributing. Thanks for folks who watch this and engage with it. You're all great. Okay, I'm probably going to try to stream this week on Wednesday. Or wait, is that right? Yeah, on Wednesday, but I'm not sure what time. So there'll be a random autism pure motivation style support sometime on Wednesday, but kind of up in the air rather, about when I'm doing it. So just as a FYI, if you're in the Discord, you can check about that, or I'll try to announce it on like Instagram and stuff. Okay, I'm gonna pop out. Y'all are great, and feel free to chat.